Imam Jamil returns to the source. His name rings with the clang of an icon, perhaps because he was. Known as Imam Jamil Al-Amin, he lived at least 2 lives as an icon. His pre-conversion life as a black nationalist, fiery speaker, and student organizer and activist, then known as H. Rap Brown, a man known as a deep supporter of black liberation. He was born Hubert Gerard Brown in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, on October 4th, 1943. He was therefore a man in his 20s when he was elected national chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC in the old days, after Stokely Carmichael left office in May 1967. His rapid speaking style gave him the nickname Rap, decades before the rise of rap as an art form in music. As a young man, his rap led to him being targeted by state and federal government agencies, snooping, and harassment. Indeed, the federal government passed the H. Rap Brown Act to stop him from speaking out. He was named a target in the COINTELPRO files. His bust on weapons charges led him to a 5-year bid in the feds, where he embraced Islam, inspired, no doubt, by the example set by Malcolm X, later known as El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. When he left the joint, he moved to Atlanta to serve the community as their imam. He worked to keep his community safe from the imposition of drugs. Imam Jamil, years after he was named the Minister of Justice of the Black Panther Party, emerged as a spiritual leader or minister of his community, dedicated to the safety of mothers and children in the neighborhood. It was there that the state attacked, perhaps because of his anti-drug efforts, arrested again, or was it targeted again? Thrown into the federal system, they tried to silence him forever. With his lawyer and wife, Karima, they fought to get him treated and retried. Imam Jamil suffered from an aggressive form of cancer. The fight continued, of course. But on Sunday, November 23rd, 2025, Imam Jamil breathed his last breath. Imam Jamil Al-Amin lived through 82 winters in America. Through it all, he fought for liberation and spiritual freedom. He returns to the source. With love, not fear. This is Mumia Abu Jamal.
It took nearly 5 years, but federal authorities arrested a suspect in the case of 2 pipe bombs placed outside the Democratic and Republican National Committee headquarters the night before the January 6th Capitol riot. The story, first reported by CBS News. Here is Attorney General Pam Bondi on the arrest of Brian Cole Jr.
Let me be clear. There was no new tip. There was no new witness. Just good, diligent police work and prosecutorial work, working as a team along with ATF, Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police Department, and of course, the FBI.
Jennifer Jacobs has been doggedly following this story, and I'm so glad you're with me. Jennifer, what do we know about the suspect?
Brian Cole Jr. is 30 years old. He lived with his mom about an hour south of Washington, D.C., in a house in Northern Virginia. He worked in a bail bondsman's office. He wore eyeglasses and was 5'6" tall. Those are key points in the investigation. Now, major sources told CBS News that investigators are looking at some possible writings that have some sort of anarchist leanings. But at the news conference today, investigators declined to comment on what they think his motive was.
Was this suspect on the radar earlier?
It's interesting because it really was a cold case. The FBI built this on several pieces of information that was revealed today, one being bomb-making materials. Interestingly, the FBI was able to track his bank account records and his credit card records, and they were able to determine that some of the things that he purchased matched the items that were in these IEDs at the DNC and RNC headquarters. Proximity. About 3 weeks before this bombing attempt, he made a purchase at a restaurant on Capitol Hill, so they knew he was there, possibly casing the scene. His car, on the night the bombs were planted, one of those automated license plate readers clocked his Nissan Sentra less than half a mile away from the crime scene. At cell phone records on that night of the bomb planting, his cell phone started pinging right near the DNC headquarters and the RNC headquarters. And then those physical descriptions, those physical characteristics, FBI agents were able to look at that surveillance footage from the night of the bomb plantings, and they were able to determine that that suspect in that footage was about 5'7" tall, plus or minus an inch. This man matches that. The person they arrested matches that. Also in that surveillance footage, the suspect adjusts his eyeglasses at times.
The Attorney General and others at the press conference today left the impression that this was a cold case that shouldn't necessarily have been cold. What were they driving at?
That's right. They did attribute this. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, said that this was just the determination of the FBI Director, Kash Patel, and the Deputy Director, Dan Bongino, staying determined in chasing this down. What we do know, Major, is that this really was a cold case for years. The FBI looked into hundreds of tips, and they did interviews. They issued subpoenas for stores that sold the particular kind of tennis shoes that this suspect was wearing in the video, and they just were not able to crack the case. Kash Patel indeed stressed today that this was not any sort of an external tip. It was all just good police work done internally.
Very good. Jennifer Jacobs, I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much.
Let's see if I can process it this way. So, to my knowledge, William O'Neill, he was never on the FBI most wanted list. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Bill Ayers, was he on the FBI most wanted list?
Well, Bernadine Dohrn was on the 10 most wanted list. I don't think Bill Ayers was, but yeah. But Bernadine Dohrn was, who was a weather woman, who was with Bill Ayers.
Cohorts, weather woman, she was with Bill Ayers. In a group that's sending bombs. Did you congratulate yourself for being friends with Bill Ayers or some of these other white criminals?
I didn't see them as white criminals, and I don't see them now as white criminals, and I don't accept that characterization of them. I think they violated the law. I don't think they did it for personal gain. They may have made mistakes, but I don't characterize them as criminals. And we also defended many people who were in SDS. From my first case was the first day of the conspiracy trial, and the SDS people were out in front protesting the fact that Bobby Seale had been bound and gagged. They were arrested for a protest and a civil disobedience, and Fred was in the same, was next to them talking about, and I think this is where he became a national figure, talking about having seen Bobby Seale bound and gagged. And I think that image of, which reminded some people so much of slavery, was significant in Fred becoming a national figure and a national target.
Unless my memory is correct, the Weather Underground, was this the group where they were sending bombs and making bombs and such to bomb government structures and such?
They weren't sending bombs. They were making a bomb, some of them in Greenwich Village, that went off, and 3 of their members were killed. Everything else that they did, and after that, did not kill or harm anybody. They planted bombs in things like the Pentagon and various government buildings, police stations, as an act of both protest and particularly around the war and around police brutality.
Thank you for the clarification. I got Unabomber, Chicago. I got Ted Kaczynski on my mind, which is cowardly behavior. There's a difference, though, between sending and planting, but that is criminal behavior.
Well,
I didn't say that they... Hang on one second, I'm not done. I didn't say that they killed anybody, but, I mean, you could say, I think, as you said, that they violated the law, but they didn't do it for personal gain. I mean, I didn't say that they were Bernie Madoff in this situation, but many people could say that they've... Oh, my God. The folks at Columbine, that white boy sold a gun to Eric Harris illegally for $9. He didn't even make personal profit off of that and ended up going to jail for 6 years because that is criminal behavior. And this is another one where, my God, now I want you all to pause and think if Fred Hampton had been planting IEDs on government structures, regardless of whether or not anyone was present, casualties or no, what this would be like. I already told you, Bill Ayers, distinguished professional. Even, man, that is the exact sort of thing that I talk about. These people are planting bombs, and we can't even call this what it is, criminal behavior. Terrorist behavior, not criminal behavior. Well, I mean, that would count too, but really, terrorist behavior. That's what William Rosenau called it in the text last week. Context of white supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information about the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Friday, December 5, 2025. So I have been told. The Katherine Massey Book Club, right and exact as usual. Yesterday, December 4, 56 years to the day that Chairman Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were assassinated in Chicago, Illinois, courtesy of the Chicago Police Department, Ed Hanrahan, FBI, COINTELPRO, J. Edgar Hoover, long list of white enforcement officials working together to terrorize and kill black people. But that was December 4, Chicago, Illinois. In fact, Ed Hanrahan, we read about him in the Katherine Massey Book Club earlier this year. He was the white man involved in Abraham Bolden sending him to jail, saying, "You messing around, old gangster thug." Got him out the Secret Service and all that for trying to testify in the JFK assassination. We just passed November 22 as well. Anyway, today, our second installment on the book. Tonight, we bombed the U.S. Capitol. The explosive story of M19, America's first white female terrorist group. We're picking up close to the end of chapter 2. We left off there last week. There's a slight break in the text, and then it resumes. That's where we're picking up at this week. Also, our timing is astronomical. H. Rap Brown just passed away within the last 10 days. He has been mentioned in the last 2 books that we read. Mumia Abu Jamal, we started reading Evelyn Williams' book, Inadmissible Evidence, and he had commentary acknowledge the passing of Assata Shakur, and then we go to read this book, and he's giving his commentary to acknowledge the passing of H. Rap Brown, who was just mentioned in the first portion of the reading of this book last week. And they said Mumia Abu-Jamal, H. Rap Brown, did what I complained about last week, changed his name, Imam Jamil Al-Amin, when he changed his face to being Muslim. He talked about even perhaps being influenced by Minister Malcolm X about that. Minister Malcolm X, El-Hajj El-Malik Shabazz. Anyway, but Mumia Abu-Jabal said that when Jamil Al-Amin was locked up the second time, 21st century, that might have been targeted as well. COINTELPRO lives. I agree. Our timing, the second installment, so we might actually be reading this book on Insurrection Day, January 6, 2026. We'll have to see. 5 years out, we'll have to see. But they've been looking at who put those pipe bombs at the Democratic and Republican headquarters in Washington, D.C., and lo and behold, Thursday of this week, they done nabbed old Brian J. Cole Jr., black male. I mistakenly said on the Thursday Neutralizing Workplace Racism that this was a white person because, I mean, what in the Ted Kaczynski? What in the Eric Rudolph? What in the Eric Harris? What in the Timothy McVeigh? And I can just go on and on and on and on and on, but I did not expect no January 6th insurrectionist planting pipe bombs like Dylan Rebb to turn out to be no privileged black male, but strive for accuracy. That is Brian J. Cole. We'll see what more details they release about this fella, but that's the suspect that they have in custody who was just arrested Thursday. They said they're checking to see if he has anarchist writings like the Turner Diaries, like Bill Ayers' book. Anyway, and then the last segment, that was former COWS guest, suspected racist Jeffrey Haas. He was a guest on the program in the summer of 2023. We talked about his book and time spent working with activists in the Chicago area, including Fred Hampton. He wrote a whole book about the assassination and how that impacted his understanding of white supremacy racism. I said last week that we talked about Bill Ayers. He insisted Bill Ayers cannot be no terrorist. This was 21st century John Brown, and you got to give him his flowers, and don't you call him no criminal. And we were out there doing great things for the Students for Democratic Society and trying to free no-count Negroes like you and amplify the legacy of Fred Hampton. And don't you call Bill Ayers and none of these other good white people anything but not racist. Not all white people is racist. You hear all that? Now, can't call him a criminal. I can't say nothing more than if Fred Hampton had been out. You heard the way they talked about Assata Shakur? If she and Fred Hampton had been out putting bombs on, they could have put a bomb on an empty mailbox. Ain't no way in the Christ we gonna let them slide. Don't you call them no criminal. They just bombed the mailbox in the name of freeing the Negro. Get out of here, man. Can't call a white person by the correct title at no time. You can't call them a racist. You can't call them a criminal. Can't even call Mary Kay Letourneau a child rapist. Come on, man, but you can call every black person a coon. Man, get to it. Katherine Massey Book Club. Context of white supremacy. Tonight, we bombed the U.S. Capitol. Audio segment 1.
The FBI and local cops had long suspected that Marilyn was mixed up with the BLA. The San Francisco Police Department raided her apartment on October 29, 1970, and arrested her after they found a shotgun, an M1 carbine, a couple of 9mm pistols, ammunition, and some bags of weed and other drugs. A judge ruled that there hadn't been probable cause for the raid and turned her loose. The San Francisco Police Department had to return her weapons. The cops believed that Marilyn had become pregnant by BLA member Ronald Stanley Bridgeforth and that she had had an abortion. According to the police, she was also a paramour of Richard Edward Brown, a purported member of both the BLA and Tribal Thumb. 4 years later, Bell, Bottom, and Washington were convicted of premeditated murder, and each received a sentence of 25 years to life. Washington died behind bars in 2000. In 2018, the New York State Parole Board voted to release Bell. He had a sturdy network of supporters and was capable of living a law-abiding life, the board said. Officer Piagentini's widow, Diane, said that the board's decision devalues the life of my brave husband, who was taken from his 2 daughters, and for whom there is no parole. Bottom remains behind bars. In 1968, Bridgeforth shot at 3 police officers outside the White Front discount store on El Camino Real in South San Francisco. By 1969, he was a fugitive, having jumped bail after pleading no contest to an assault with a deadly weapon. Cops suspected that Bridgeforth was a getaway driver during the Ingleside attack. He would spend 4 decades on the run, in Senegal, in the Gambia, in Atlanta, and finally in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he taught at a community college under the name Cole Jordan. In 2011, Bridgeforth turned himself in to California authorities, pled guilty to the 1968 shooting, and was sentenced to a year in the San Mateo County Jail. San Francisco detectives liked Marilyn for the Ingleside attack. A white woman matching her description had reported a stolen bicycle at the station house a few days before the assault. A reconnaissance mission, no doubt. Marilyn was, in fact, working as the BLA's quartermaster, the group's only white member, according to press accounts. An FBI bulletin quoted from what the Bureau said was a BLA manual for prospective urban guerrillas. We do not need to take weapons from iced, killed pigs, especially those who have been righteously baconized. There are better places to rip off weapons, not where they can be linked to butchered hogs. Marilyn didn't steal firearms. She had no need to. She simply bought them at gun stores. Well-educated, poised, savvy, not to mention a wasp from Texas, Buck was far less likely than her trigger-happy comrades to draw police attention, or so it would seem. For a couple of years, nobody could pin anything on her, but evidence started to pile up, and on March 22, 1973, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms agents and San Francisco cops raided her place at 136 Peralta. The charge: using fake IDs to buy more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition and 9mm Browning high-power pistols in Arizona, Oregon, and Austin. Federal offenses. Later, U.S. Marshals hauled her to Phoenix to stand trial. Wearing a stylish pink suede coat, Marilyn giggled with her lawyer and spent much of her time in court smiling at 2 female supporters. She is very intelligent, very clever, and very dangerous, the judge said during sentencing. He gave her 10 years, the most severe sentence possible under the law. He said he wanted to save others from being killed. The state saw her as terrorist and traitor, a white woman dangerous to white America, Marilyn wrote in an autobiographical poem. She'd been handed a preposterous, politically motivated sentence, she insisted. Just look at Dean Martin Jr., busted in 1974 for possessing an illegal arsenal that included machine guns and an 8-foot-long anti-tank weapon. The son of the celebrity had gotten off with probation. In 1974, Marilyn began her sentence at the Federal Reformatory for Women in Alderson, West Virginia. She was assigned to the Special Treatment Unit, the prison's strictest regime. Prison shrinks did an assessment. She was seductive and provocative in an intellectual way, they concluded, adding, this woman had a strong masculine identification. She tends to equate male strengths with power and is heavily identified with male aggressiveness. Back in the mid-1970s, prison authorities, prosecutors, and judges still maintained the notion that convicts could and should be rehabilitated. Prison, in their view, wasn't just about punishment, and short-term releases were considered therapeutic. In November 1976, Marilyn got a 6-day furlough to visit her parents in Galveston, Texas. The following June, she got a second respite, this time to visit her lawyer in New York, Susan Tipograph. However, Marilyn never returned to Alderson and added federal fugitive to her list of crimes. She found sanctuary in New York's radical community and dug into the underground. 3. The White Edge. In the imperialist metropole, where the organization of the anti-imperialist struggle must have both legal and illegal components, the political struggle and the armed struggle, bank robbery cannot be dispensed with. It is, in practice, expropriation. Serve the People, The Urban Guerrilla and Class Struggle, April 1972. Some May 19th members chose to enter clandestine realms and support people who were not public and people who are doing illegal things, Judy Clark said. One of those people was Assata Shakur. In the late 1970s, Doc Shakur was running his acupuncture operation, the Black Acupuncture Advisory Association of North America, or BANA, out of his Harlem brownstone. He taught classes, treated patients, and engaged in other, more surreptitious activities. He'd assembled a criminal crew that included Tyrone Q. Ryson, a.k.a. Little Brother, a.k.a. Osedric Lalupe, a U.S. Army veteran, and Sekou Big Daddy Odinga. Most were veterans of the Black Panther Party and the BLA. The crew committed armed robberies, ostensibly to raise money for the Republic of New Africa. But helping homegrown freedom fighters wasn't Doc's only motive. He and some of the crew were heavily into cocaine. Sniff, they called it. There's no evidence that they sold any serious amounts of coke, but they regularly robbed small-time dealers. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, illegal narcotics trafficking was a billion-dollar-a-year business. Once largely controlled by the Italian mafia, the drug trade was increasingly dominated by colorful, ruthless figures such as Leroy Nicky Barnes, a.k.a. Mr. Untouchable, who made the cover of the New York Times Magazine in June 1977, and Frank Superfly Lucas, whose criminal exploits served as the inspiration for the Superfly film. They called their ensemble the Family, apparently not caring that Charles Manson and his murderous band of acid-crazed followers had already made the name notorious. The first job they plotted was an armored car robbery in Pittsburgh, but they got cold feet at the last minute. They retreated to New York, but were soon over whatever fears had stopped them in Pennsylvania. During an 18-month period beginning in May 1977, the Family did 3 jobs: the House O'Weeney's hot dog factory in the Bronx, a Citibank branch in suburban Mount Vernon, New York, and a Chase Manhattan Bank on Lower 9th Avenue in Manhattan. These were relatively crude operations. Doc's men fired shots and dropped money on the stairs during the House O'Weeney's job. During the Mount Vernon heist, wrote the journalist John Castellucci, Ryson had to rush inside the bank and yell, "Let's go," to Odinga, who had stayed beyond the 30-second time limit. The 3 robberies netted the men a total of $22,180. Not bad, but not great, considering the risks involved. Doc was looking for help, some way to boost his yield and shore up his bottom line. He had an idea: enlist some savvy white women who could carry out relatively sophisticated robbery-related missions without the unwanted attention that the men of color in his crew were sure to attract from police. Shakur put out feelers to May 19th, telling the women that he was raising money to pay for weapons, ammunition, safe houses, and anything else that Afro-American freedom fighters might need to wage the armed struggle. And he wanted to bankroll land buys for the Republic of New Africa down south. He said he'd been involved in several felonious fundraising ventures, expropriations, he called them. David Gilbert, a former Weather Underground member who was part of the Family's most notorious and deadly operation, said decades later that such high-risk fundraising activities were a necessary part of the revolution. Militants were not going to be awarded grants from the Rockefeller or Ford Foundation. A former BLA member made a similar point. Armed expropriations were revolutionary compulsory tax. Doc had a proposition for the May 19th women: come join the Family. He and the guys would supply the firepower and the muscle, the all-male primary team, as he called it. The women would print fake IDs, line up safe houses, provide perimeter security during operations, and drive getaway cars. It was a criminal revolutionary take on Cold War America's division of domestic labor. With the women on board, the family could carry out more advanced and more lucrative armed operations. To the women of May 19th, Shakur seemed like a righteous soldier, a real revolutionary who'd do just about anything to heighten the contradictions and usher in the revolution. "I am not a militant. I am not a rabble-rouser. I am not macho," Doc once said. Maybe so, but the women were still mesmerized by Shakur's tough guy persona, rhetoric, and street cred. And he was offering them a chance to do more than organize demonstrations and print posters. His offer resonated with the women. According to one internal May 19th paper, white leftists had spent far too much time simply mouthing revolution, always years in the future, and abandoning third world comrades on the front lines. It was a priority for white communists to participate in armed struggle under the leadership of third world groups such as the Black Liberation Army and the Puerto Rican Independistas fighting for the liberation of that island. May 19th was in. The women would refer to themselves as the White Edge. However, Doc and the guys called them the Crackers. Shakur gave the orders, and Marilyn was the go-between who passed them along to the other women. Each got a nom de guerre: Dee, Marilyn; Elizabeth, Susan; Alex, Judy; and Louise, Sylvia. The family hatched plots at the Banna building. Its prime targets were cans of corn, family lingo for armored trucks. New Jersey was a target-rich environment, and they robbed Coin Depot armored cars outside Bamberger's department stores in Livingston and Paramus for a total take of $300,000. May 19th helped bring in a whole new level of sophistication: surveillance, false identification, safe houses, and switch cars to throw off any pursuing police. Bringing in the White Edge seemed to be paying off. But the family's activities weren't limited to armored car stick-ups. Revolutionary fundraising was necessary, but not sufficient. If you weren't having real political impact, you were just another criminal. Doc started thinking big. 2 high-profile revolutionaries were languishing behind bars, and Shakur and the May 19th women wanted them out. Morningside Heights, according to one 1981 New York Times piece, is in many ways as eclectic and tolerant as the great domed presence of Columbia's Low Library that is at its center. Its transient population moves every couple of years in a welter of secondhand furniture, toaster ovens, textbooks, and hanging plants. Housing was relatively cheap, and rent-controlled apartments were still available if you greased the right palms. The area was perfect for a fledgling revolutionary formation. May 19th had a bunch of places near Columbia. There was a spacious 3-bedroom apartment at 211 West 106th Street, and another at 526 West 111th Street. Some of the women lived a little farther south, at 243 West 98th Street, and others at 200 West 95th Street. The endless meetings, the comings and goings at all hours, and the apartment full of women in their 20s and 30s didn't seem to attract much attention. The would-be insurrectionists were able to hide in plain sight. Given her federal fugitive status, Marilyn needed something more secluded. She liked the anonymity of working-class East Orange, New Jersey. It wasn't too far from the city, it was dirt cheap, and it had good lines of communication. In other words, it was a great place for a safe house. Marilyn, using the name Carol Durant, rented an apartment at 223 Prospect Street. Living was communal, hippie style. Money was always tight, and living together was a way to cut down on expenses. More important, being in a collective meant that you were almost never alone, and that everybody was watching everybody else. Just as in the Weather Underground, the May 19th communards conducted harrowing and lengthy self-criticism sessions, in which members would face their comrades, confess to ideological deviations, bourgeois affectations, or even simple laziness, and then fight for oneself, and demonstrate that they were on the path to political and personal reconstruction. This hothouse environment reinforced the group's values. It was 24/7 indoctrination. Real revolutionaries didn't have time off. A former member of a Maoist group in Philadelphia described in 1981 how their cell used self-criticism, In a follow-up discussion to a cell meeting, one cadre made the uncontested statement, "We just have to admit that we are essentially bad people." Members were expected to evaluate weaknesses and errors made throughout their lives and then to develop all-inclusive self-criticisms, typed out in triplicate, in much the same manner as one collects their sins and purges themselves for the confessional, and then becomes cleansed in one fell swoop. The PWOC, Degeneration into Ultra-Leftism. Encyclopedia of Anti-Revisionism Online, Fall, 1981. Four. Handless terrorist escapes. During the 1970s, New York was an arena for extremist groups that were looking to air their international grievances. As the media capital of the world, the city was a soundstage for anti-Castro exiles, Croatian nationalists, Puerto Rican independistas, and other groups trying to draw global attention to their causes. For example, Croatian separatists were suspected in the December 29, 1975 bombing at New York's LaGuardia Airport that killed 11 people and wounded 75 more. Omega 7, a violently anti-Castro group, carried out multiple bombings of the Cuban mission to the United Nations during the late 1970s and attempted to assassinate the mission's chief diplomat with a car bomb on March 25, 1980. Among the most formidable was the Fuerzas Armadas de Liberación Nacional, or FALN, which fought to create an independent, socialist Puerto Rico aligned with Fidel Castro's Cuba. The extreme left was in awe of the Puerto Ricans. They were America's very own anti-colonial movement, and they were willing to use any means necessary, including deadly violence. The FALN was responsible for more than 100 bombings, including an August 3, 1977 attack on Mobil Oil headquarters in Midtown Manhattan that killed one office worker and severely wounded others. The group did more than bomb. It was also responsible for an attack on the federal electoral system. On March 15, 1980, the FALN stormed the Carter Mondale presidential campaign office in Chicago and the George H.W. Bush campaign office in New York, where they held campaign workers hostage while they ransacked the facilities and stole lists of supporters. A Carter Mondale campaign worker, Bruce Moran, told reporters about a man with a pump-action shotgun and a woman with a pistol. Ordering Moran to get down on his knees, one of the FALN members said, "This is a takeover." In New York, 10 campaign workers were bound and gagged. According to retired FBI Special Agent Donald R. Wofford, on the days that followed these incidents, the group sent threatening letters to around 200 Carter Mondale supporters, including Democratic National Convention delegates living throughout the state of Illinois. But their most notorious attack took place downtown in the financial district. On January 24, 1975, the FALN planted a bomb inside an entrance to Francis Tavern at 101 Broad Street. The place was drenched in American history. General George Washington had bidden farewell to his officers there in 1783. The private Anglers Club and the offices of the Sons of the Revolution were upstairs. At 1:29 p.m., during the lunch service, the device went off, killing 4 people and wounding 60 more. Queens, July 1978. By 1978, the NYPD knew plenty about William Morales. It had been on his tail for years. He'd held a lot of jobs over the years: airline reservation agent, school teacher, lab technician, lifeguard, photographer. But there was only one that really mattered to the cops. He was the FALN's go-to explosives guy, its IED guru, its bomb maker in chief. The NYPD believed he had built the Francis Tavern device, but they didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. They would get the evidence they needed in a spectacular fashion. On a warm afternoon in New York in the summer of 1978, Morales was in his seedy 2-room apartment at 2649 96th Street in the Elmhurst section of Queens, assembling a new IED. As he put on the finishing touches, something went wrong. Maybe it was some static electricity, a little vibration, a slight temperature change. Morales's creation detonated. The blast sheared off 9 of his fingers and a chunk of his face. You could hear the explosion for blocks around. The NYPD hauled a massive load of bomb-making materials out of the FALN factory, enough to build 28 explosive devices and 2,632 incendiary devices, according to the bomb squad. Still, Morales refused to go down without a fight. Investigators found bloodstains on the knobs of his gas stove. It looked as though he'd dragged himself post-blast across the floor and used his mouth to turn on the stove. His goal? To fill the place with gas. Responding cops might inadvertently set off an explosion, sending out the bomb maker and anybody else in the apartment in a blaze of glory. A detective tried to question him. "Fuck you. Fuck yourself," Morales said. "It's you that are fucked, pal," said the cop. "You'll be wiping your ass with your elbows." They locked him up in the Federal Metropolitan Correctional Center on Park Row in Lower Manhattan. Morales was a mess, and he needed some serious medical treatment. Doctors wanted to reattach his blown-off digits, but the FBI insisted on holding them as evidence. He was transferred to the third-floor prison ward at Bellevue Hospital at 30th Street and 1st Avenue. Although Morales was behind bars, the FALN's violent campaign continued. On New Year's Eve 1982, bombs went off at 26 Federal Plaza and at NYPD headquarters at 1 Police Plaza. According to one policeman, the headquarters blast hit Detective Rocco Pasquarella, blowing away most of his left side. Another detective, Richard Pastorella, was also hit by the explosion, which threw him 25 feet, blew off all the fingers of his right hand, and left him blind in both eyes. He has had 13 major operations and 20 titanium screws inserted just to hold his face together. Morales had been languishing in the ward for nearly a year, waiting to be fitted with a pair of artificial hands. He knew for certain that if he were convicted for France's Tavern, he'd be going away for life. The May 19th women knew all about Morales and decided to help. Morales was a bona fide third worlder, a righteous freedom fighter, and one terrifyingly effective anti-imperialist. Moreover, in their judgment, it was a political necessity, according to one May 19th discussion paper. Fighting to free the freedom fighters, like Morales, helped fulfill a critically important role in People's War, building conscious, mass support, building a mass base that can be mobilized to fight fascism and white supremacy in all its forms. Breaking Morales out would be a major coup. From the outside, the Bellevue ward looked wide open. People wandered in and out. There was little prisoner supervision, and guards napped on the job. The FBI complained about Morales's move out of the federal lockup downtown. Bellevue simply wasn't secure enough to hold somebody as dangerous as him. But an escape plan was already in place. It would be a big operation involving some 30 people from the FALN, the BLA, and May 19th. By mid-May of 1979, everything was lined up. On May 18th, Morales's lawyer, Tip Tipograph, visited her client between 6:20 and 7:10 p.m. Alfredo Mendez, a convicted FALN member and government informant, claimed later that Tip had a 14-inch bolt cutter strapped to her thigh and covered by her frock. However delivered, Morales ended up in possession of a bolt cutter. On the night of the 21st, he got to work. His stumps frantically working the strapped-on bolt cutters, he snipped through the thin wire mesh covering the windows and somehow managed to shimmy down a rope improvised from ace bandages. Fellow revolutionaries were waiting for him below. Comrades took Morales to the safe house that Marilyn rented in East Orange, New Jersey. Tip has consistently denied playing any role in the Bellevue breakout, and she has never been charged in connection with the escape. "I think if the allegations could have been substantiated, I would have been arrested 4 years ago," she said in 1983. "Every time I saw Mr. Morales, I was searched," she said. "If they had the slightest bit of evidence other than these lies and innuendos, I assume I would have been arrested." However, according to federal prosecutors, for a few weeks prior to the date of the escape, Tipograph became increasingly vehement in asserting that the attorney-client privilege protected her from a search by correction officers. On one occasion, when correction officers denied her request to be exempted for a search, she surrendered a knife only after repeated questioning. On the day of her last visit with Morales, her bag was not searched, nor did she go through a metal detector, nor was she physically searched. "Handless terrorist escapes," a New York Post headline screamed the day following the escape. One press account said Morales had been plucked up by somebody in a borrowed New York telephone cherry picker. The truth was more prosaic. The improvised rope had snapped under the strain of Morales's weight, and he had fallen a couple of stories. A window air conditioning unit had broken his fall. No one has ever revealed the details of how he did it, but eventually Morales made it across the border into Mexico, an impressive feat given that he was a wanted man with a pair of stumps and a horribly mangled face. Things were copacetic for a couple of years. Then the FBI found out where he was and tipped off the Mexican federal police. On May 26, 1983, the cops surrounded his place in the small city of Puebla, 65 miles southwest of Mexico City, and a shootout ensued. A cop and two of Morales's associates were killed, but Morales was captured. In custody, he was uncharacteristically chatty, telling a local bureau agent that it was Tip who had slipped him the bolt cutters. Morales claimed that Mexican security personnel had tortured him with electric prods and beat him while FBI agents and New York City police officers stood next door. Morales was sentenced to 12 years in Mexico, but was released early, in 1988. The United States asked for his extradition, but Mexico refused, and Morales was allowed to go to Havana. Today, Morales remains a guest of the Cuban government. The FBI still wants him back, and it's offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. Politicians such as U.S. Senators Marco Rubio and Robert Menendez periodically demand that the Cubans turn him over. In December 2006, the New York Daily News reported the existence of the Guillermo Morales Assata Shakur Community and Student Center at City College. The City University of New York chancellor ordered the sign taken down, but the center remained open until October 2013, when the college abruptly closed it, sparking student protests and arrests. As of 2015, Morales was living in an apartment building on 3rd Street in the capital's Vedado section. Even after mutilation, prison, and exile, Morales has kept his revolutionary discipline. "It's a shame that things happen to me, to cops and to innocent people," he said, "but that comes with the job." New York, 1979. May 19th had had a major asset to aid it in breaking out Morales. Alan Berkman, M.D., who was one of the doctors who treated Morales at Bellevue, and also happened to be a supporter of the cause. He was a man, but that was offset by his impeccable radical credentials, and moreover, he was a licensed, practicing medical doctor. He had skills that proved helpful in the planning of the breakout, and would be critical if one of the group was injured. Born at Israel Zion Hospital in Brooklyn on September 4, 1945, Alan was the second of Samuel and Mona Berkman's 4 children. In 1948, the Berkmans relocated to Middletown, New York, a town of 22,000 people about 70 miles northwest of New York City. Sam owned a modest wholesale plumbing and heating supply business. Semi-rural Orange County in the 1950s had all the markings of classic small-town life: unlocked doors, a bustling downtown, and telephone numbers with only 5 digits. Alan was a normal, straight-arrow kid with an astronaut-style crew cut. He spent his free time hanging out with pals and watching Howdy Doody, Sea Hunt, Have Gun, Will Travel, and other Eisenhower-era TV favorites. He hunted in the woods outside town. His transgressions were minor, even Tom Sawyer-like. In his unfinished memoirs, he recalled swiping apples from a neighbor's tree and waiting for the cops to come. They never did. His social conscience emerged early, though. Alan couldn't live with the idea of prejudice, his brother Stephen wrote in 1990. Alan befriended Skippy Sepluin, a Puerto Rican who lived nearby. He was chastised and threatened by fellow students, but never gave in to the peer pressure. He attended Middletown High School, an impressive twin-turreted structure that the town's residents were rightly proud of. He was a standout, National Merit Scholar, class salutatorian, track star, Eagle Scout. His future seemed bright. Like most parents, Sam and Mona wanted a better life for their kids. A college education was central to their American dream. "My father had done manual labor for years before getting his little business," Alan told a reporter in 1985. "They always wanted me to do better, to be a doctor, to have money, but they never wanted me to be as disrespectful as other people had been to them, because they had never gone to college." After graduating from high school in 1963, Allen went to Cornell and graduated in the class of 1967. He played defensive tackle on the lightweight football team and served as president of his fraternity. Fully grown, Allen was 5 feet 11 and 170 pounds. He had black hair and a pronounced cleft chin, a feature noted in the early 1980s when he began appearing on FBI wanted posters. During the mid-1960s, once sleepy Cornell started to boil. SDS was growing. The Black Power movement had a presence. In March of Allen's senior year, Cornell's fraternity council sponsored a Soul of Blackness Week. Stokely Carmichael, the leader of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, gave a blistering speech to a standing-room-only crowd, blasting assorted evils including the Vietnam War, white supremacy, and the draft. As with Marilyn at the University of Texas during that same year, Carmichael's scorching speak had a powerful effect on Allen, and he started to develop a new political consciousness. Originally a mild Kennedy-style liberal, Allen moved steadily leftward as the 1960s wore on, and, like many of his cohorts, he burned with rage over poverty, racism, and the insanity of the war in Southeast Asia. After getting his BA, Allen attended Columbia's College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York. The oldest medical school in the country, Columbia was very traditional, jackets and ties, and no facial hair. There were very few blacks or women, and no Latino students at all. But there was a small group of white activists. Allen got involved in anti-war teach-ins and joined sit-ins calling for affirmative action, pass-fail grading, and an end of the dress code. In April 1968, there was a student uprising at Columbia's main campus in Morningside Heights. SDS members, unaligned revolutionaries, and various outside agitators occupied buildings and issued fiery anti-war and anti-establishment proclamations. A handful of radical celebrities, including Dwight McDonald and Stokely Carmichael, came to observe the spectacle. One photo imprinted on the mind of the culture was of a protester in dark glasses easing back in University President Grayson Kirk's swivel chair and lighting one of the president's cigars. The Student Afro-American Society took over Hamilton Hall, the heart of Columbia College. To Kirk, it seemed as though events were spinning out of control, and he decided to call in the NYPD to clear out the protesters. 1,000 policemen showed up. Helmeted cops cracked student skulls, and plainclothes agents swung blackjacks. Allen stitched up scalps and comforted the walking wounded. He was shocked by the police violence. Calling them pigs was not an abstraction to me anymore, he said. Allen started reading Karl Marx and was wowed by the 19th century theorist's approach to understanding society. He joined a Marxist-Leninist study group and concluded that the time for reform and incremental change was over. By the beginning of the 1970s, he had become a committed revolutionary. That didn't hinder his studies, though, and in 1971 he graduated near the top of his med school class. His clinical and diagnostic skills were highly regarded. The newly minted MD took an internship at Presbyterian Hospital on the Upper East Side, one of the best hospitals in the country. 2 days into the job, Allen became part of one of the most famous food poisoning cases in American history. While caring for a woman in the intensive care unit who was suffering from some unknown affliction, he came to a shrewd diagnosis: botulism poisoning, a relatively rare condition. The botulism was traced to the can of bon vivant vichyssoise she and her recently deceased husband had eaten a few days before. Mrs. Cochran lived, but spent the rest of her life in a wheelchair. His family expected the usual doctor's trajectory: residency at a top hospital, a well-paid specialty, wife and kids parked out in the suburban hinterlands of Scarsdale or Hohokus. But for Allen, that kind of life was out of the question. "I couldn't simply go back to a medical career and occasional demonstrations," he recalled. It felt like betrayal. He didn't give up medicine. Instead, he fused it with his Marxist ideology. Rather than go on to a medical residency, he decided to focus on community health as a doctor to the downtrodden. He worked at a Black Panther-founded healthcare clinic in the South Bronx and cared for prisoners at the Bronx House of Detention. Off-duty, he organized potluck suppers to raise funds for Third World groups such as the Front for the Liberation of Mozambique, or Frelimo. Then he began taking more dramatic and direct action. On September 9, 1971, inmates at New York's Attica Correctional Facility revolted. The place was an upstate penal hellhole packed with black and brown prisoners guarded by pissed-off whites. Convicts wanted an end to the squalor, overcrowding, and brutality. A few prisoners spouted fiery revolutionary rhetoric, but most of the jailbirds just wanted to reclaim their human dignity. When the convicts grabbed 42 staff members as hostages, the authorities were ill-prepared. New York State's prison commissioner, Russell Oswald, couldn't decide on a plan. Eventually, Oswald's liberal Republican boss, Governor Nelson Rockefeller, demanded an end to the Attica standoff. The time for talk was over. Rocky, likely thinking about a future run for U.S. president, green-lighted the retaking of Attica. At 9:46 on the morning of September 13th, salvos of tear gas signaled the beginning of the operation. Guards and state troopers opened fire on the prisoners and hostages massed in the central prison yard, known as Times Square, a poignant reference to the crossroads in a city many of the Attica denizens called home. 43 convicts and prison staffers died, and hundreds of prisoners were wounded. Allen and some of his fellow med school students made it to Attica and treated casualties. 3 years later, Rockefeller made it to the White House, but only as Gerald Ford's unelected vice president. In 1979, atop his 25-year-old assistant, Rocky succumbed to a massive coronary attack. A joke soon made the rounds. Q. How did Rocky kick the bucket? A. Low blood pressure, 70/25. In 1973, Allen used his considerable medical talents to comfort the sick and wounded in another violent standoff. On February 27th, armed members of the American Indian Movement took over the town of Wounded Knee on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. The activists grabbed hostages and demanded that the U.S. government abide by the terms of the treaties it had signed with the Oglala Lakota in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The National Guard, the FBI, and the U.S. Marshals Service sealed the place off. A 71-day siege ensued. The sides traded gunfire on a daily basis. 2 Native Americans were killed, and a federal agent was shot and paralyzed. Allen and his girlfriend, a short, frizzy-haired fellow doctor named Barbara Zeller, sneaked through the federal cordon to bring supplies and medical care. They arrived at Wounded Knee after a hair-raising 2-day, 30-mile overland trek. Day and night they had to evade armed patrols and armored vehicles and sneak across a no-man's land. One woman in labor needed care in a fully equipped hospital, but she refused to leave the reservation. "I want the baby born free, and this is the only place," Allen recalled her telling him. The incident sent him reeling. Here she was, willing to risk her life. "It told me something about this country," he said. People should be able to determine their own destiny. Back in New York, Allen's political commitments grew. His family knew he was into some heavy things, his brother Stephen wrote. Most of his time was taken up with the Prairie Fire Organizing Committee, or PFOC, the above-ground transmission belt for the Weather Underground's pronouncements and theoretical musings. Allen met Laura Whitehorn and Susan Rosenberg, both PFOC leaders. Technically, he wasn't in weather, but he was a sympathizer, a fellow traveler, as the old Communist Party USA called its unofficial adherents. Most Prairie Fire members believed the group was independent, but in reality, PFOC was controlled by weather. Not all weather people lived subterranean lives. Some, like Laura, lived and worked above ground, while keeping their weather affiliation hidden. They shaped PFOC's agenda. It was a time-tested Leninist approach. In late January and early February 1976, PFOC convened the Hard Times Conference in Chicago. Thousands of assorted leftists attended, including radical notables such as the lawyer William Kunstler and Boston University history professor Howard Zinn. The conference's theme, "Hard Times Are Fighting Times." Expectations were high. But Hard Times was a fiasco. The Weather Underground organization, pulling PFOC's strings, pushed a narrow, rigid political line. The international working class had the central role in worldwide revolution. The inert wage slaves toiling in factories, mines, and power plants had to be aroused and alerted to their world historical role. Puerto Ricans, Palestinians, Namibians, homosexuals, women, all of them could help, of course, but they were ideological second stringers. A black caucus and a women's caucus were frozen out. Conference goers gagged on the workers' first political line. Susan later called the conclave male-defined and not pro-lesbian. An anti-imperialist and pro-feminist gay men's collective hammered the Hard Times organizers as sellouts and reactionaries. Revelations that the Weather Underground had used PFOC as its stooges added to the general outrage. The ideological flailing continued into the following year. Clayton Van Littegraff, a grizzled 62-year-old communist militant who had helped weather spring LSD guru Timothy Leary from prison back in 1970, ripped into Weather's Central Committee in a 1977 collection, The Split of the Weather Underground Organization. The document was creepily hermetic, dogmatic, sloganistic, and censorious, almost unbelievably dated and Byzantine, as historian Jeremy Verone described it. The Split was part of the miasma of despair, self-loathing, and confusion that permeated the late 1970s ultra-left. Laura did a public mea culpa a few months after the Hard Times shambles. As a founder of the PFOC and as organizational secretary, I take full responsibility for leading the organization in a revisionist direction, she said. Post-Hard Times, Allen also self-flagellated. He confessed to being a male chauvinist, weather stooge, anti-lesbian, and anti-imperialist. Allen's partner, Barbara, gave birth to a daughter, Sarah, in October 1976. The baby's middle name was Michelle, no doubt given in honor of Samora Moises Michel, a charismatic Frelimo guerrilla leader who became Mozambique's first post-independence leader. Sarah's arrival caused Allen to reflect on his life's direction. He considered abandoning radical activism and concentrating on his medical practice and family. But the lure of revolution was too strong. During the late 1970s, Allen worked at a variety of clinics and hospitals around the city. He treated indigents down on the Lower East Side and up in the Bronx, and part-time at the Bellevue prison ward. PFOC had split bi-coastal, as had the Black Panther Party before it. The West Coast faction kept the name. On the East Coast, Susan helped rebrand PFOC as the May 19th Communist Organization, and after the success of the Morales breakout, Allen was inspired to take a more active role in its actions. Allen used his medical skills to make an important contribution not long after becoming part of May 19th. Judy longed for motherhood. She said she wanted to become pregnant as a conscious lesbian. Conventional procreative sex was out of the question. Pamphlets such as Artificial Insemination, an Alternative Conception for the Lesbian and Gay Community, offered solid tips. Some women prefer using a turkey baster. This is fine, but remember not to place it against the cervix at the opening. It can be dangerous to put air into the uterus, and a turkey baster holds a lot of air. The guidebook offered words of caution about semen. The unfamiliar or well-forgotten smell and consistency might take some getting used to. She had a better idea. Allen. He was in decent physical shape, he was highly intelligent, and he came with the correct ideological alignment. He willingly donated his sperm and assisted with the insemination. Harriet Josina Clark was born on November 13th, 1980. Judy was a doting new mother, but some of the other May 19th women weren't so excited about her new focus. The May 19th women were single-minded in their pursuit. There was no room for motherhood, at least at that moment. Judy was conflicted. She loved her child, but she also loved her comrades. I loved being a mother, and I also felt very split because I didn't think it was legitimate, I guess, according to my political philosophy and group commitments, she said. It felt very individualistic, and so I had an incredible desire to just do nothing else but mother her. Divided between the two loyalties, Judy ultimately decided to go with May 19th women. After all, she was a self-described single-minded fanatic who was at war with America. From then on, she spent a lot less time with little Harriet. Her daughter would be raised collectively, with the responsibilities for childcare divided among multiple May 19th members, as had sometimes been the case in the Weather Underground.
White people do not care about children. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. So that's audio segment number 1. We shall resume. Let's see, we'll be right at the beginning of chapter 5. America is trying to lynch me. Again, for people who do not have like a physical copy of Tonight We Bombed the U.S. Capitol, they spell America with a K. And sometimes they have 3 Ks. Sometimes it's just 1 K as opposed to the C. But K's in America. I never was inspired or enthralled, even amused with that. I think you can go back and look at, my writings, show descriptions, program descriptions over many years. And yeah, I do not spell Africa with a K or America with a K. I do not think that solves any problems or pushes us any closer to justice. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. So if you have commentary to share, questions, first portion of the reading, the number 720-716-7300, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 720-716-7300, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Email untiljustice@gmail.com. If you have thoughts to share on the first chunk of the reading. Now, I will confess, I did not know anything about William Morales until we got to reading this here text, right? That's reading is more important than watching television, for sure. But as we were reading, I'm going and trying to look and see who these people are. That's one thing I can say, like, unequivocally. You are out of your loony, cotton-picking, uncodified mind, anybody in the known universe. And I would say this to my mother, my grandmother, my father, my grandfather, anybody else you like. Reading fiction versus nonfiction, as ignorant as we all are, and I mean everybody. Me, you put Gus T at the top of the list, ignorant than anybody in the universe has ever been. Gus T, for sure. Unequivocal on that one. But as ignorant as we are collectively, are you serious? You gonna go read some fiction and tell me seriously, oh yeah, I'm gonna learn a whole lot. You're out of your mind, and or you're lying to yourself. You're lying to me. All that's set up for entertainment. We do not need no more entertainments, amusements, none of that. We need to be learning. I didn't even know who this guy was. Where's the fiction book that's gonna tell you about a William Morales going out and bombing up in New York? Where's that fiction book at? Come on, man, get it together. Anyway, I didn't know nothing about William Morales, and I certainly didn't know nothing about the William Guillermo Morales Assata Shakur Community and Student Center. What? What in the world? What? Do what? That's like mandatory field trip. Like, what? Where? How did they get? What? White people must have really been like not paying attention for a while to even allow such. Like, they got the Assata Shakur High School in Milwaukee. Now, Milwaukee has a super duper high population of black people, and it's a really poor city. So, but even still, that's kind of like, wow, they got Assata Shakur High School, and okay. But the Guillermo Morales Assata Shakur Community and Student Center? I'm not surprised they shut it down with no notice, nothing. Like, what were we thinking? Who was asleep? Somebody is going to get in trouble for this one. That's what the white response would be to even, what? They got pictures and sign. Anyway, that's one. And I didn't know who William Morales is. When I started looking online, they got pictures of Assata Shakur and William Morales together in Cuba. This is the dude fighting for Puerto Rican independence, so-called, and bombing places and all that, bombed himself in the process. They got pictures of him with his disfigured face in Cuba with Assata Shakur. Wow. Man, and I would say just based on these pictures, I think William Morales is probably not white. Y'all have to look. They have a number of pictures of him online, color pictures of him online, so I don't know. You can look. You tell me. Do you think William Morales, bomber, do you think he is a non-white male? Let me know. See what you think. But they got him with, apparently, Assata thought he was cool. Wow. I'm still learning. Okay, so and I posted pictures. That picture of Assata and Mr. Morales, I posted that picture together, and then I posted pictures of the center named after those two. Wacky. Okay, so they mentioned Dr. Allen, and he's going to go and get his nice, cushy job in Scarsdale. That was one of the options, and of course now any of these locations that I hear about, when they mention Scarsdale, I say, uh-oh, is this a racially restricted region? So I go to James Lowen's site, racially restricted region, and he says about Scarsdale, probable. And then I go down to see if they have any notes or comments. Scarsdale's black population in 1960 was overwhelmingly female, about 7-1. 794 of the black residents that year lived in households with non-relatives as head of household. This indicates that most or all of these black people were live-in domestic workers, and that is talked about explicitly in sundown towns, where sometimes you have a very low population of black people, and this is what it is. Got to go buff these floors and all that, so you just stay with us. White Plains and Scarsdale, New York. White Plains. White Plains and Scarsdale, New York used zoning and other police powers to remove poor blacks from settled neighborhoods and redevelop them for affluent whites. Whatever affluent whites means, see Paul H. Mattingly, Suburban Landscapes. So that's Scarsdale. That wasn't the only location that was mentioned. The other one that was mentioned was Ho-Ho-Kus. Now, I'd never even heard of Ho-Ho-Kus. New Jersey, never been there, don't know nothing about it, do the same thing. Is Ho-Ho-Kus, New Jersey? Is this a sundown town? Probably. James Lowen's site. Go look at the numbers. Now, before I even got to the notes, he normally he'll go to the census and give you what the census says for racial demographics. I was just scanning for Ho-Ho-Kus. Their population in 2000 was 4,060. So this is kind of a small place. Out of that 4,060, they have 24 Negras. I don't even need to see the rest. This, for sure, sounds like a sundown town. But let's see what the comments say. This was a very affluent, elite, that sounds redundant, so elite town that barred Jews until the 1960s. Maybe not a sundown town, but it's pretty bleak. On a television program, WNET on NYC in World War II, one of the interviewees mentioned that she and her husband tried to buy a house in Ho-Ho-Kus with his GI benefits, but the town was segregated against Jews in the late 1940s. Ho-Ho-Kus is one of New Jersey's many boroughs, a type of municipality unique to the state. A New Jersey resident reports Ho-Ho-Kus was all white when he was growing up in the area. A former Ho-Ho-Kus resident says there was a sign restricted. Oh, buddy. That I do a slight pat on the back. That ain't worth no corn chips or nothing. And what I just said is for sure true. The most ignorant in the known universe, most ignorant on any plantation that ever existed is for sure Gus T. Renegade. That's facts. But that said, when we read James Lowen's Sundown Towns in my top 10, unfortunately, begrudgingly, I said Sundown Town, that's not no accurate descriptor for what this is. I wouldn't care if they did euphemistically say, hey, it's Sundown Town, don't let the sun hit you when you go down, we gonna get out of here, man. These are racially restricted. They got that in quotes like that. Maybe that's all that's on the sign. Restricted. What's the restriction? Racial restrictions on this here region. You get ho. White, and we ain't even got to get to, all the rest of it. You already know. Restrict. We better keep rolling, Leroy. We better keep rolling. But that's, so Scarsdale, Ho-Hocus, anywhere where they say, wow, this is a nice place here. We want to settle down and have a good life. Beat it, Leroy. Restricted. Beat it. I believe Sundown Town. Isn't that nonfiction? I believe that's nonfiction. You think? Okay. Let's see. Folks who have dial-in commentary on, I cannot believe we are back to the bombers. We read about Columbine and all that before, and then we Tim McVeigh, and then we right back to bombers. Man. And apropos with the bombing suspect black this week in D.C., or I guess he lived in Virginia. We'll say DMV area. But woo-wee. Wow. Let's see. Folks who have commentary on the first chunk of the reading, check, and I'll get in some of our emails as well. Let's see. Email number 1. Greetings, Gus, listeners and callers. I'm still processing the issue of all white people are not racist within the context of this book. As you know, Mr. Fuller would answer the question with his example of a white infant or a white person who was demented or having a severe stroke as not having the ability to practice racism. I think this is a clever response. Victims guaranteed qualified. I do not find that clever at all. Like, God bless the dead. Anybody who's offended about that, and apparently this does bother many non-white people, I don't care. Again, this is why we're estranged. Major reason that right there. I just don't agree with you all, even Fuller. And that's supposed to be fine, but apparently it's not. You don't get VGQ on this one, or at least my VGQ status gets revoked on this one. No problem. We can be estranged forever, but just make it clear that this is why we're estranged. I don't think that's clever at all. And I've said this for years. I've heard that for years when people get really lathered up, non-white people, and excited. Hey, not all white peoples is racist. Maybe they're talking about some of the clowns, white clowns in this book. And I say, what? And they'll say, no, in fact, wait a minute. No, they don't mention none of these white clowns in this book. They mention white infants, white people in a coma, vegetative state. I do not find that clever at all. I find the term that was used yesterday, I find that as a total abuse of my time and energy. Really, you are insulting my intelligence. When we talk about what does it mean to be a functional white person, and you can't even name me a white person who is walking around and functioning. You got to pick somebody who was just born 2 seconds ago. Nah, he ain't racist now. He ain't even got a name yet. What are you talking about? Theodore's in a coma. What are you talking about? Really now, really, once I had to sit on that for a minute and think, wow, you are telling me everything I know about what it means to be white. And I say this with my chest out because, hey, man, I didn't just find Neely Fuller yesterday. I talked to Neely Fuller Jr. about this specifically before the cows even came back on the air in 2009. It's been almost 20 years. I talked to him directly about this. One nothing where I had to sit around and be mad or anything like that. No, I just went to him directly. Fuller, what do it mean to be white? Because it seemed like, just following logic, at the end of the day, we ain't got no white people that ain't racist. All we got is racists and victims. You know what Fuller said? Functionally, yup. It won't know. Whoa, Brother Gosson. What about the comatose white people? Nah, man, he didn't say that. He said, functionally, yup. And that's all I'm concerned about. Functioning. How do you function as a white person? Because frankly, I don't see nobody in my day-to-day life. Oh, man, look at comatose Theodore. In fact, you know what I do here? When you got comatose Theodore, Selma, she got Alzheimer's and all that, but she white. When I get up out my coma, might be one of the only things that I can think of and remember. Is that a nigger? I've heard that. I've heard that repeatedly, even from Tim Wise. He said that exactly. I might lose my marbles and can't remember my name, but nigger. I got that part. I got that. Anyway, but victims guaranteed qualified. I do not think that that is clever. White babies and vegetative white. Ain't no har about that at all for Gus T. Continuing. A few years ago, I asked Fuller on his radio program, if you interact with any person classified as white, are you more likely than not dealing with a racist white supremacist? He gave a very brief answer. I told you, I'm accustomed to that. Let's fast forward and get through all this. Without equivocation, yes. There we go. No, come on, man. Stop. You might have comatose Ted. No, come on. Chapter 2. Marilyn Buck. Pregnant Ronald Stanley Bridgeforth, BLA member, abortion Richard Edward Brown. Mr. Bridgeforth turned himself in after being a fugitive for more than 40 years. He became a counselor at Washtenaw, Community College under an alias, Mr. Brown. All this like Shamika Harris and just making up new names. Man, I think all this would be way more. If you are not white, I think it would be substantially more challenging to do all this. I think they had that case recently with a black dude. He got deported or something. He had done the same thing, like he had faked his resume and he was like a high school principal or something. And he didn't even have the credentials. I don't even think he was a citizen. But it didn't last no 40 years. I think he was able to do this for like a year or so, and then they, picked up on things. But I think with all the technology and such and the racism, I think it would be way more challenging to get away with this sort of thing, just making up an alias, making up credentials, and, you're wanted by the police for serious crimes, and I just do an old switcher. Oh, no, I'm not Gus. My name is Herman Kornfeld. And I just get to go live as Herman for the next 50 years. Like, come on. Let's see. Mr. Brown was a known activist in the San Francisco community. Mr. Brown was arrested at age 65. See alleged former Black Liberation Army warrior Ronald Bridgeforth comes forward in a 43-year-old shooting. This is from 2011. San Francisco News. Let's see. And he's sentenced to 40 years, or sentenced after 40 years on the lam. A real victory for law enforcement. 8 accused of officer's assassination arrested after 35 years. Let's see. I'm sure the police were not thrilled about all of that free time that he had to go and do whatever else, teach at a college. They say pretend to be an upstanding citizen. 2, Marilyn Buck did not need to steal firearms. She was well educated, poised, savvy, not to mention a WASP, Texas. You can just say she was a white woman. Facts. Fast forward. That's the only characteristic that was needed. Facts. And then you notice again we have the emphasis on how smart white people are. It's always good. White people are so clever and they're so smart and they're so educated and savvy. Like, we got it. They even said that about, of course, Mary Kay, but Susan Smith, that's what I was thinking of. And she didn't have no, college bona fide. She wasn't no Clemson alumnus or nothing like that, and they still said she's so smart. Get out of here. 3. Prison shrinks thought Marilyn was seductive, provocative, in an intellectual way. So she's smart now. Racist white supremacists are the smartest people in the known universe. Facts. 3. Doc Shakur, Matula Shakur, they're talking about. When I first read the author calling him Doc, it struck as a subtle dig at his credentials, but maybe it's just what his other comrades called him. I'm not sure. It could be both, really, because they weren't friends, you know? It really could be both. I would have to see, like, did people call him that? Because, I mean, some people, that is a total nickname. I could totally see that being the case, where maybe some people did actually call him Doc Shakur. I could also see it being Doc. That's it could be totally both. 2. Armed expropriations, Dr. Shakur. Is this really that different from the euphemistic language the racist white supremacists use to describe their evil deeds on a global scale? The Middle Passage, Indian reservations, microaggressions, white privilege. All of it is incorrect. Absolutely. And even I would have to ask, who came up with this term armed expropriations? Because a lot of this, what shall I call it, rhetoric and jargon of the night, even all that off the pigs and all of that, if all of this is genuine and organic and this just came out of the brain computer and thinking of victims of racism at that time, and they thought, hey, we came up with this and this is how we want to articulate our views on racism, white supremacy at this time, fine. Same thing I said, VGQ, victims guaranteed qualified. I am suspicious because I've seen, just like all those other terms that he mentioned, microaggression, white privilege, I have seen where white people, they are so slick, they are so refined, and they got all the Sioux Africas and agent provocateurs all over the place where they can come up with this jargon and phrases and such, and then we pick it up and start using it and act like we came up with it, and nah, man, white people came up with this. So I don't even know. I would have to know who came up with the phrase armed expropriation, because that would sound like a white people, all of it, really, because it would be difficult for me to think black people thinking we're going to go and rob what and live to tell about it? What? We're going to get so refined at this that we're going to be able to come up with terms like, yeah, these are armed expropriation. Like, what? Like, I mean, I guess. But they got that on record, white people going and encouraging black people to do reckless, criminal, foolhardy things like this, Sioux Africa. And then, you get, arrested and locked up and all the rest of it. So, but yeah, total correct point. White people they are the masters of lying and being deceptive with terms and pussyfooting about things. 3, May 19th is in. Women refer to themselves as the white edge, like White Plains. Doc and the guys called them crackers. Communal hippie style, never alone, watching everybody else. Lengthy self-criticism sessions, 24/7 indoctrination. Seems like a lot of confusion was going on among these victims. The 8th area of activity, sex just made things exponentially worse. That was one of my big takeaways from the first portion of the reading last week. Because last week they said we had all that hot white P word, right? They were so explicit about it, and particularly, we're lesbians. We're lesbians. Did we tell you we're lesbians? And we're white lesbians against white supremacy. And it's not just white supremacy, because they come down hard on us lesbians too. It was all of that and all of this sex. We're going to have all this wild sex. They mentioned some of that this week already, having these white women, and I'm going having sex with some of my BLA members and all the rest of it. And they so attractive. And that H-Rap Brown, he got that swagger about it. Confusion. I said Sioux Africa. I keep admitting it was so much of that during this time period. Confusion. And then you get all this mumbo jumbo rhetoric off the pig. Nobody has a definition for racism. Hey, not all white peoples is racist. For 1970s FALN, Socialist Puerto Rico, online Fidel Castro's Cuba, 100 bombings. This is William Morales. They plant bombs at the France's Tavern, killing 4, wounded 60 on New Year's Eve, 1982, NYPD headquarters. Detective Roscoe Pascarella blew off all of his fingers, his right hand, blind in both eyes. William Morales, East Elmhurst, improvised explosive device, IED. Blast shredded off 9 of his own fingers. How does this produce justice? Uh-oh. That was a question. Uh-oh. Well, him blowing his own fingers off, that was an accident, so we'll, be more careful. We'll move that one to the side. Blowing up the police precinct for New Year's Eve. How does that produce justice? How does that produce justice? It shows people who are classified as white that the violence will not just be one-sided, and that if you do not produce justice immediately, there will be casualties on both sides. Maybe that's the thing. This is not my project, right? It's always best to ask the people. But that would be a phenomenal question to ask Mr. Morales or any of these other people who were doing bombings and killing folks. Even, I said from the beginning, even if you're not killing people, you got a bomb. Somebody could die. That is really, really serious. That could be an accident. Anything could happen with a bomb. You have debris flying and what have you, and it could be a whoops. It was somebody in the building cleaning that I didn't expect was going to be there, or whoops, glass flew from the building and hit somebody who was across the street walking their dog. That is really, really serious. Even the property destruction of all of this. How does that produce justice? Excellent question. Keeping focused. What is all this about? Because white people love to tear up stuff. White people kill for fun. Now, I know William Morales is not, that's my view. William Morales is not white. Other people can look and see what they think, but I don't think he's white. I don't think he'd be accepted as white today, and I don't think he was accepted as white then. But they mentioned a lot of white people, Will Ayers and the Weather Underground, these other white people. You got a lot of white people. This would just be fun. Timothy McVeigh. Hey, this is when Ted Kaczynski got rolling. Late 1970s, Unabomber. Boom. See what I did? See? But white people kill for fun. Any white person come up with a reason. I got an old grievance. I'm mad. Boom. That could have been Luigi. I don't want to go shoot the old CEO. I could have sent him an old package bomb. But matter of fact, I forgot. Luigi said he was inspired by old bombing Unabomber Ted's, because I totally forgot about that. It's basically white people kill for fun. They love this. I'm mad. And just make up a reason. I'm mad. The niggers, yeah, I'm mad. Wait, yeah, we got the Rita Porkins. Oh, what is it? Puerto Ricans. Yeah, whatever. We got the Puerto Rican. Yeah, we got to get them. Yeah, that's right. I'm with it. Who you say you with? Castro? What is it? Yeah, okay. Yeah. White people kill for fun. That's Dill and Reb, Columbine. White people kill and bomb. They went high school making pipe bombs, man. Let's see. 2. Morales, 1979 escape. Wait a minute. The listener, he said Morales appears to be non-white in the photograph. That's what I said. So we got 2. That's what I said. All the photos. And they had a bunch of them online. You can look. All the pictures that I've seen, Morales is for sure not white. I ain't got no question. Now, we can, if you think he'd be classified as black or whatever, I don't know. Might not even matter, but definitely not white. 2. The escape. New York Post, handless terrorist escapes. Lawyer tipograph, bolt cutter Cuba politicians Senator Mark Rubio, Robert Menendez demand Cuba turn him over. We discussed the provocative New York Post headlines in the last text, inadmissible evidence. Yes, we did. Senators Rubio and Melendez are examples of white male descendants of Cuban exiles who are constantly haranguing about Cuba. Melendez, for the past 20 years, has been embroiled in various federal indictments for corruption and ethics violations. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to 11 years in 2025. Dang. Dang, that's wild. 3. Alan Berkman, MD, treated Morales at Bellevue, a supporter of the cause. His social consciousness emerged early. I'm going to need a definition of social consciousness. I have no idea what that would mean. Maybe, hey, not all white people are racist. This is the white fellow who was incidentally going to go out to Hohokus. Is that how you say it? Hohokus, Scarsdale. He'd go out there and be a doctor for the uber elite, affluent white people. There's no niggers except the live-in nanny. That's Strom Thurmond style. Let's see. 4. Cornell started to fraternity Soul of Blackness Week. In mid-1960s, Stokely Carmichael, leader of the SNCC, burned with rage over poverty, racism, war in Southeast Asia. Found an article in the Cornell student paper from the period discussing the Soul of Blackness Week. How about that? Job well done. The first speaker of the week was John Howard Griffin, author of the nonfiction book Black Like Me. The author temporarily darkened his skin to see what it felt like to be a black male. It was also made into a movie. See Souls of Blackness theme for IFC Week. John Howard Griffin to speak here Sunday. The Cornell Daily Sun, volume LXX, whatever. This is from February 1967. That is amazing. Those student newspapers at the colleges and universities can be amazing resources for all kinds of subject matters, especially if it's something that happened close to where that college is. Like, oh man, it can be, amazing. 5. Attended Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons, New York. Very few blacks or women, no Latinos. Duh. Allen got involved, calling for affirmative action. I could not find any statistics on the number of black medical students at Columbia today, but I imagine it is still very low. You could probably add 2 varies. In fact, even him advocating for affirmative action, man, anytime I hear affirmative action, hopefully for any cows listener, anytime you hear affirmative action, all you think is that means you wanted more white women, you wanted more LGBTQ white people, you wanted more elderly white people, you wanted more white men even. Say that they're beat up and don't get a good break and all the rest of it. That's all that means. We're going to find some white people in a wheelchair and all the rest of it. And, I got the neurodiversity. That's what you should be thinking of. Yeah, I champion for affirmative action. That don't mean I want Leroy to get a job now. 6. Attica revolted. This is 1971. Allen treated casualties. The American Indian Movement AIM. Wounded Knee used medical talents. Doing constructive things for victims does not necessarily mean you are not a racist white supremacist. What? That is crazy. So I see that, I know tons of non-white people say, what is wrong with you? Not all white peoples is racist. Sue Africa and John Brown, and Dr. Allen here, and what have you done, you trifling, lazy heathen? That's what I've heard non-white people say. Dr. Allen, he didn't went up to Wounded Knee to help them non-white people. Went out to Attica to help them black prisoners. What's wrong with you? 7. Hard Times Conference, Chicago. William Kunstler, professor, Boston University. Howard Zinn was a fiasco. Mr. Kunstler was mentioned in the last text. Yes, he was. Inadmissible evidence as a lawyer and civil rights activist. And I said these white lawyers, like Jeffrey Haas, he was a white lawyer too. I said I didn't have suspicion until we read Evelyn Williams' book where she said She suspected that some of these white attorneys were racist because they were working against her. They weren't sharing information. Then they would come in and sabotage the whole plan to try to get them off. Like, man, what is going on? And she said she felt there was some sort of, they're kind of using delectable Negro type thing, using these black defendants' cases like Assata to get some fame, clout chasing, and exactly that. I could say, hey, I ain't no racist now. I work pro bono on Assata Shakur's case. I work pro bono on Geronimo Pratt case. I know Matulu Doc. That's my homie. I call him Doc. What you mean racist? That sort of thing. I wasn't thinking that until we read that book. Howard Zinn died in 2010, was the author of the best-selling A People's History of the United States. He was also described as a civil rights and anti-war activist. That'd be another way that not all white people is racist. Prior to coming to Boston University, he was chairman of the Department of History at Spelman College for 7 years. He was fired by the African-American president of Spelman, Albert Manley, because he thought he was radicalizing the students. I want to know, what does radicalizing, what does that mean? Break it down for me. Give me that. That is kind of clowning, though, unless I'm misinformed, for Howard Zinn, white man, to get fired from an HBCU. Har, 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 har. I'm sure he landed on his feet, metaphor. 6, the international working class, central role. Worldwide Puerto Ricans, Palestinians, Namibians, homosexuals, women, ideological second stringers, a black caucus and women's caucus were frozen out, whatever that means. I suspect when they say working class, they are only referring to white males. Namibians is being used as a term for all black people? I don't know. Is that I've never heard that done before. This is, wacky times and they got all their goofy terms, so maybe, but I've never heard that. I've never heard anyone use the term Namibians and they mean all of the people who are called black. I haven't even heard anyone use the term Namibians and they mean all of the black people just in Africa. Like, I've never heard that, but that would be news to me. Like, that would be news to me. I think, yeah, if anyone has insight on that one, fill us in, por favor. 9, pamphlet Artificial Insemination, an alternative conception for a lesbian gay community. The Turkey Baster guidebook. Harriet, her daughter, would be raised collectively. I said, white people do not care about children. And this idea was very prominent at the time. This is, if people remember, does this sound similar to Jonestown? How they get you locked into the group. They take your child and they send your child to someone else so that your child is just raised as a part of the collective and they're not attached to you specifically, directly. They don't even stay with you in the same like residence or hut or tent or whatever it is, where if you're out in the jungle or even if you're back here, even that is Move, Sue Africa and Company, same thing. Collective, we all live together and all the children stay together and are kind of taught, and it's, you break away from that, me and my child just staying together, like, oh, no. Let's see. He says, this all seems so non-constructive. Seems like they're just experimenting with conception and parenthood, exhibiting the arrogance and narcissism of people classified as white. Facts, especially, what's all this wild, goofy sex for if we're really not into doing the whole, children thing and all that? Hey, you could just adopt some children. You don't even have to have, especially if you're going to be doing bombs and all this criminal activity, children do not need to be in that sort of environment anyway. Did I miss something? Unless this is just going to be a Columbine type thing and you're going to have them out doing the pipe bombs once they get to 14 anyway, well then, what in the world? Anyway, but I do think that's important because it's the same time period and it's the same type of behavior with Jonestown, the Move organization, and, white people don't care about children, so we break the whole parental concept. You're not even vested in the whole parenting, and we just say we're a collective and this is a hippie lifestyle type of a thing. Let's see. Much obliged. Email untiljustice@gmail.com. We'll get to the rest of it as we read more. We'll see if other folks have thoughts to share. I'll get some of my notes in if folks are processing, getting their ideas together. I don't know if folks are maybe less interested in this subject matter, which is often the case with the Katherine Massey Book Club, or not taking notes, but man, even if they didn't have the bombing suspect at the Capitol captured, I would be interesting. But with that happening at the same time, I am even more interested, because I thought about reading this book right after the January insurrection took place, waited, and it became even more relevant. So, hey, hopefully, folks, archive, live, hopefully learn something, get some information. At minimum, we haven't even gotten to the section about them breaking Assata Shakur out of prison. So, at least on those 2 points. All white people racist? Are we learning about some non-racist white people? Is this how non-racist white people would behave? And then we'll get to learn some more about Assata Shakur as well. That America is trying to lynch me. Assata Shakur on deck. Next chapter, in fact. Well, let's see. Let me get some of my. Can I get that in right quick? The note 4. They said 3 years later, Rockefeller made it to the White House, but only as Gerald Ford's unelected vice president in 1979, atop his 25-year-old assistant. Rocky succumbed to a massive coronary attack. What in the Jeff Epstein? Really? That's Strom Thurmond. Remember, he was doing the same thing. I think he was like, what, in his 60s or something, and got married, found him a little, like, 25-year-old thing that she was a beauty contest after his previous wife had died or whatever. He goes and marries her. And they're like, whoa, people like, what's going on, Strom? About he got this little young thing. Is she young enough to be his daughter? What's going on? Widespread in the system of white supremacy racism. Widespread. I don't even know if that'd be too much of an eyebrow raise. Now he's in his 70s. Is she 25? Man. What was Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky? Is that about? I don't think he was that old, but I mean, white culture. Come on. Let's see. Really, 25 that's kind of old, really. Jeff Epstein. Let's see. Okay, going back, because we picked up the last little chunk of chapter 2, when I said Marilyn Buck was working as the Black Liberation Army's quartermaster, the group's only white member, according to press accounts. What is the quartermaster? Like, what is that position exactly? What are your duties as a white woman in the Black Liberation Army as the quartermaster? And then I keep, what does it mean to be white? And not all white peoples is racist? We in the super militant Black Liberation Army, and we got Marilyn Buck. Why? Why? She's not, and she's convinced everybody here that she's not racist. And that happens in so many, and really, I wouldn't even believe that she's the only white member, because so many organizations at this time period, I don't remember any organizations other than SNCC, and that broke the group apart. They're saying, hey, we don't want to do Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and then maybe we shouldn't have white members. Like, oh, we're done. We're done with it. That messed the whole group up. But I'm not really aware of you having groups like the Black Panthers said explicitly, we're not anti-white. We are not against white people. Seems like they would be the same thing. Not all white people is racist. We've heard that over and over again. Like, you can't even pick a group. But what, Nation of Islam? We had a white woman who was in the Nation of Islam on the program. I can't even. You would have to fill me in and tell me some groups where they've said, hey, we no kicking it with white people. That disqualifies you. If you say you want to help or whatever, right on, but you don't need to join our group. You can get out there and do this and do that and blah, blah, blah. We don't need to hang out. You don't need to talk to me about nothing. Beat it. that apparently was in short supply. Sue Africa, because it's lots of it. And at the minimum, it does not take much to allay the suspicions of black people. That's black ink fact. Don't take much for Sue Africa to wiggle right on in and boop, 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 boop. Oh, I ain't no racist now. Let's see. See, this is what I mean in terms of where does this rhetoric originate? This passage where it says an FBI bulletin quoted from what the Bureau said was a BLA manual for prospective urban guerrillas. Even that right there is just the way that it's written. This is a bulletin that's quoted from what the Bureau said. So this even sounds like, maybe, whatever. Maybe they said this, maybe they didn't, maybe we're lying, whatever. We do not need to take weapons from iced pigs, especially those who have been righteously baconized. There are better places to rip off weapons, not where they can be linked to butchered hogs. What? Who? What? And because that was a part of COINTELPRO where white people would sit around and snicker and say, I'm going to write like the Negro. They do that now. I said they get on Twitter and get their old Negro avatar. They love that. They love to blackface up and find different ways of pretending to be Negro. Practice racism. It's like a big racist joke to them. But they would giggle about this. I sign a letter as Leroy and call them names and all that and go do something like this and we going to butcher and baconize. That just sounds goofy to me. Like, I have not been around black people who talk like that. We gonna baconize. What? 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 I would just be looking like, what? We ain't even got to get to the no metaphor. What are you talking about? And I'm vegan. Like, what are you talking about, man? Baconized. Man, come on. But all that sounds like what I would expect a white person who is trying to make some sort of racist joke or even thinking that they're clever and I'm going to write like a black person. Pull one over on them. Let's see. And then Maryland didn't steal firearms. I thought that was important too. I'm white. I have much easier ways to access firearms. Let's see. At the beginning of chapter 3, the white edge, in the imperialist metropole, where the organization of the anti-imperialist struggle must have both legal and illegal components, the political struggle and the armed struggle, bank robbery cannot be dispensed with. It is, in practice, expropriation. Serve the people, the urban guerrilla and class struggle. Now, see, if this is what they're saying is the supposed manual, I said, nope, I'm calling shenanigans. We talked about this with Jeffrey Haas. Fred Hampton, yesterday, December 4, he was killed 56 years ago yesterday. Fred Hampton did not have no Harvard education. He didn't get to go to Cornell. He didn't get to go to the University of Illinois. Matter of fact, he didn't even live to be 25. I'm not saying he was ignorant, but I do not think you had William O'Neill, employed by FBI agent, victim of white supremacy to help them in the assassination of Fred Hampton, Mark Clark. He was recruited at the age of 19. At the age of 19, when all this is going down in December 1969. You're not going to tell me that a group of mostly very young people, 19, 20, late teens, early 20s, very limited education, low reading skills, and then you're going to tell me that they go and sound like this? No, I do not believe that at all. And like I said, it is a documented part of the COINTELPRO activities. White people lie. They would go and produce something like this and then say, oh, yeah, the Negroes wrote this. Oh, yeah, they're talking about their radical activities and guerrilla plans and expropriation. Nope. All of this sounds like COINTELPRO. All of this sounds like white people and the way that they were talking, and we'll blame this on the Negroes. I could be in error. Let's see. Them calling their organization the family almost as though it was named after Charles Manson. There are many whole books saying that Charles Manson, that there are many things suspicious about this organization, about this person and this organization that was operating in California at the same time as Jim Jones. Some even speculate, was this some sort of CIA operation as well? Again, Charles Manson, when he went out and committed those crimes, he did exactly what I'm talking about. He did exactly what I'm talking about. He went out and committed those crimes and wrote "off the pigs" on the wall, smell like bacon, did all that, and they went out and say, oh, we think Geronimo Pratt and them niggers did this. No, this Charlie Manson, a white dude, and his white people. That's what I'm saying. This was rampant during this time period, and some people speculate that all of that was a CIA operation. All of that. Charles Manson, there's books on that. You can read that to yourself. More reading. But if Assata Shakur organization, they end up being named the family too, that's something else that I would tab and say, where did that come from? If it was named the family, who decided on that name? Charles Manson was enormous. I mean, that was the most talked about case, till Jeff Dahmer of the time period. So I'm sure even on the opposite side of the continent, they would have known who Charles Manson was. Nobody would have said, oh, no, we don't want to use that. They might think, we got something to do with that, blah, blah, blah. Like, where did this idea for this name come from? Fuller talked about that frequently. Black people, victims of racism, we will think that we are the creator source of some sort of trend or a new idea, what have you, that takes on. Nah, man, frequently. I'm not saying every time, but frequently. Nah, this is something that we got from white people. You know what you should call your group, Doc? The family. Yeah, that's it. Did you get that idea from the quartermaster? Did he get the idea? Let me go get some white women. That's just what we need in our organization for black liberation. We need to go and get us some white sisters to help. Really? That was his idea? And even if it was, victims guaranteed qualify, but I would just say, wow, that is our thinking. What does my black militant organization need? White women. Sue Africa. Let's see. Yeah, that's what I had to write that down. Doc was looking for help, some way to boost his yield and shore up his bottom line. He had an idea. List some savvy white women. You can't just have one. You got to have many who could carry out relatively sophisticated robbery-related missions without the unwanted attention that the men of color in his crew were sure to attract from police. One, that portion is not footnoted. I would have to go and check, like, exactly where did you get this information about? He said, and even the rest of it went. So it goes from that portion. I need to get these savvy white women, and that'll help us with our robbery plans and all that. I mean, are you serious? Any black person, if they looked me in my face and said, Brother Gus T, I got a criminal organization, let me run. But if I'm going to take 30 seconds to hear what all this is, I got my criminal setup going on, and we trying to help black liberation. Know you down for that. And I was thinking what I need to get over, because we attracted too much attention. I think I get me a few white chicks, and they go in and do the, like, I don't even have an intelligent question to come back. Like, how do you plan to vet them? Like, not all white peoples is racist. Even like, I'm good. You good luck with that, Leroy. I'm gonna read about that in the newspaper, because I do not expect that to be successful at all. At all. Why would that? I would have to even see, is this true? Like, is this true? This is how all this happened? Like, what? Shakur put out feelers to May 19th, telling the women that he was raising money to pay for weapons, ammunition, safe houses, and anything else the African-American freedom fighters might need to wage the armed struggle. Why would I tell any white people, why would I tell them that? Why would, if anything, you can invest in us. You don't need to know what it's for. You can invest in us. I'm going to tell them it. I don't even know if it happened this way. I would have to get details and just, not all white people is racist? Question mark. Let's see. And he told them he'd been involved in bank robberies. I would have to verify that this is true. I know this is not going to be successful. Like, I already know this is doomed to failure. Wow. If you don't understand racism, if you don't understand what it means to be white. Let's see. To the women of May 19th, white, Shakur seemed like a righteous soldier, a real revolutionary who'd do just about anything to heighten the contradictions and usher in the revolution. I have no idea what that means. That's what I mean. White people use that sort of rhetoric, and I think deliberately heighten the contradictions. That was a very popular phrase during this time period. What? Got to heighten the contradictions, brother. We got to heighten the contradictions, brother. Okay. I'm not a militant. I'm not a rabble-rouser. I'm not a macho. Doc once said, maybe so, but the women were still mesmerized by Shakur's tough guy persona, rhetoric, and street cred. Jeffrey Haas said the same thing. He said, oh, man, I congratulated myself. I was hanging out with these black dudes and criminals, and they tell me about how they stole a car and how they cooked chitlins. And wow, man, I just felt, ooh, I got a little bit of street cred. He said almost verbatim the exact same thing. When he did his interview, he talked about being in Chicago. Same circumstance. These white lawyers, not all white people is racist. Let's see. But all of that, the confusion, because it just sounds so delectable Negro, and it just sounds very delectable Negro to me. Like, we can have some exciting sexual activity, which is exactly what they talked about last week. And even that's curious because they had said last week they were all lesbian. Why would you be all engrossed and attracted by some macho black dude if you're all about the lesbian energy? It's just sexual confusion and racism. Let's see. I thought that was important too, where they said the white women, lesbians, all that, they say they refer themselves as the white edge. That is, I think, fascinating for so many reasons. They're calling attention to their whiteness. Again, that's what we're supposed to be working against. And they're highlighting their whiteness and not their lesbianness, not the M19, Malcolm X, and Ho Chi Minh. We're going to highlight our whiteness. And allegedly, that's our edge. As in we are advantage? Come on. Doc and the guys called them the crackers. Now, I think that's more accurate. If we're going to do some name calling, bing. Even though, hey, in Florida, they brag about calling white people crackers because they mean, whoosh, get out in that field, Leroy. Get them oranges off the tree, Leroy. The whole orchard, Leroy. Whoosh. The whole orchard, Leroy. That's what they mean. So, I don't even know if cracker racist. Hey. Nah, you're not going to be the white edge. You won't call attention to the fact that you're white, no problem. The racists. Whoa, Brother Gus, we all. Let's see. And they had nom de guerres. That's supposed to be their war names. Are you kidding me? Something about all this just seemed. Fred Hampton called these white people in like the Weather Underground, Bill Ayers and such. He called them muddleheads, scatterbrain. It's just nonsense. Like oh my goodness. I told Jeffrey Haas, I said, man, all I can do is best that I can and hope that Fred Hampton would not think that I'm some scatterbrain, muddle-brained idiot like the Weather Underground. That's the best that I can do. Let's see. They started chapter 4 with the term extremist groups. Will Rosenau. I don't know what that means. What is it? Because that's in vogue now. Extremist group. The most extreme group are the racist white supremacists. And then it's extreme left. All of that is confusing. It's not precise. People have so many different interpretations and meanings for left, right, center. What are you even talking about? Extreme left, soft left, teeny bit left, massive right. What are you talking about? Is this Mike Tyson? Come on. Let's see. Oh, I'll leave, man. I got the second portion of the audio. If you got questions, commentary, hopefully folks learning a little bit. Like I said, we're about to get to Assata Shakur, so I will hush so that we can get to Assata Shakur. Take notes if you have commentary to share. Katherine Massey Book Club, context of white supremacy.
5. America is trying to lynch me. Not long after the Morales breakout, the May 19th women joined an even more audacious plot. Not far from New York, another revered revolutionary figure sat behind bars. Joanne Chesimard was one of the brightest stars in the revolutionary firmament. Back in the 1960s, she'd ditched what she called her slave name. Henceforth, she'd call herself Assata Shakur. During the 1960s, a number of black militants related by blood or marriage took the Shakur surname. Gerald Williams became Mutulu Shakur, and his adopted brother, Anthony Costin, became Lumumba Shakur. Lumumba married Alice Faye Williams, who took the name Afeni Shakur. In 1971, she gave birth to future hip-hop great Tupac Amaru Shakur, who was named after an indigenous Peruvian ruler executed by the Spanish in 1572. "I felt that giving my child a racist cracker's name would be like cussing my child," Lumumba said. Geronimo Pratt, a senior Black Panther Party figure, was his godfather. Assata Shakur was his godmother. After her divorce from Lumumba, Afeni married Mutulu, her former brother-in-law. Joanne Chesimard had been a Black Panther, and after the party split, she joined the Black Liberation Army. Law enforcement considered her a major threat. She was the soul of the gang, the mother hen who kept them together, kept them moving, kept them shooting, said NYPD Deputy Commissioner Robert Daley. In the spring of 1973, Chesimard was wanted for questioning in connection with a string of armed robberies and BLA-connected cop killings. The crimes included the murders of NYPD patrolman Gregory Foster and Rocco Lori, killed on January 27, 1972, outside the Shrimp Boat Luncheonette at 173 Avenue B on the Lower East Side. On May 2, 1973, two New Jersey state troopers, Werner Forster and James Harper, pulled over a white Pontiac Le Mans on the southbound side of the New Jersey Turnpike near East Brunswick. 3 people were inside the car: Zaid Malik Shakur, born James F. Costin, a leader of the Harlem branch of the Black Panther Party, Sundiata Acoli, and Chesimard. Zaid and Sundiata had been defendants in the Panther 21 case, accused of attempting to bomb police stations and other targets in New York. The prosecution had failed to convince the jury, and on May 13, 1971, all of the Panther 21 had been acquitted. 6 days after the verdict, the BLA retaliated with a drive-by machine gun attack that badly wounded NYPD patrolmen Nicholas Benetti and Thomas Curry, who were on duty protecting District Attorney Frank Hogan. It was a riotous 8-month trial. Adding to the spectacle was the striking courtroom attire of one of the co-defendants, Michael Tabor, who appeared in a fly blue leatherette jacket with matching Lenin cap and a Metternich overcoat, according to the Ace columnist Murray Kempton. Afeni Shakur was another Panther 21 defendant, as was her then-husband. The violence continued during the traffic stop on the New Jersey Turnpike. Within moments, Trooper Forrester lay dead, shot in the head at point-blank range with his own service revolver, an execution-style murder, as the FBI described it. Trooper Harper was badly wounded. Zaid was shot and killed. While Sundiata escaped on foot, Assata was struck by at least 3 bullets. She survived but faced major felony charges, including first-degree murder, assault with intent to kill, and illegal possession of a weapon. After lots of legal maneuverings by both the defense and the prosecution, Assata finally went to trial. She didn't think much of the judge, Theodore Appleby. "He was a real dyed-in-the-wool cracker," she said. "The kind that could wipe out the natives in Africa, make Central America safe for a United Fruit Company, or run a sterilization center in Puerto Rico." On March 25, 1977, the jury returned its verdict, guilty on all counts. She received a life sentence with an additional 26 to 33 years for good measure. "Like all other black revolutionaries, I have been hunted like a dog," Assata said after her conviction. "And like all other black revolutionaries, America is trying to lynch me." Her case was a cause célèbre for leftists around the world. They called her a political prisoner, a victim of official racism, a revolutionary martyr. 2 years later, the family wanted Assata out. This operation was going to be strictly political, like busting out Morales, only bigger. Springing Assata, a.k.a. Cleo and Sister Love, would be a major triumph, a shock to the system, and a morale enhancer for freedom fighters the world over. As with the family's armed robberies, Doc and the guys handled the guns and the rough stuff, with the May 19th women taking on supporting parts. The Madam Bin Graphics Collective cranked out political material that laid out the ideological line. One leaflet described the police ambush of Assata, Zaid Shakur, and Akoli on the New Jersey Turnpike as part of the U.S. government's broader campaign to neutralize the Black liberation movement. In addition to making posters, May 19th rented vehicles, served as lookouts and getaway drivers, and rented safe houses. Marilyn, using the alias Delia Richards, rented a short-term hideout for Assata in East Orange at 358 Park Avenue, apartment A15. They'd budgeted carefully for what they called the Cleo trip. Their armed fundraising campaign in and around New York was supposed to cover Assata's exfiltration-related expenses. Marilyn kept careful track of family finances in a red ledger. Assata's lawyers had managed to get her assigned to the low-security Clinton Correctional Facility for Women in central New Jersey. Doc handled the casing of the inside of the prison, visiting Assata several times, signing in under his birth name, Gerald Williams. Big Daddy Odinga visited her as well, and on several occasions they discussed an escape plan. Assata was housed in South Hall, which visitors reached by a shuttle van from the reception center at the main gate. Even with the lax security, they took their time and plotted out the extraction over a 9-month period. November 2nd, 1979. Odinga arrived at the reception center and signed in. Nobody searched him, and there were no metal detectors. A shuttle van driven by a prison guard, Stephen Ravatina, took Odinga to South Hall, where a prison matron, Helen Anderson, buzzed him in. After greeting Assata, he discreetly passed her a .357 Magnum revolver he had concealed against the small of his back. Meanwhile, Ravatina got a radio call and was told to come back to reception and pick up 2 more visitors. The 2 men were Doc's guys, and when they got inside the van, one of them, Materi Shabaka Sundiata, née Samuel Smith, put a gun to the guard's head and told him to get moving. When they reached South Hall, they met Big Daddy and Chesimard, who was wielding the .357 Magnum. Somebody cuffed Ravatina and Anderson, and everybody left the building and got into the van. A short while later, they reached the designated switch point in a parking lot outside the prison grounds. Marilyn, Sylvia, and Susan were waiting for them. They hustled Assata and Odinga into the trunk of a white Lincoln Continental and headed east on Interstate 78. The entire operation took just 10 minutes. The white edge was in effect. In the immediate aftermath of the breakout, the cops were looking for a black man, not 2 white women. They arrived at the East Orange safe house. Doc showed up later with a wad of cash he'd retrieved from another safe house in Mount Vernon, New York. $50,000, half of the proceeds from the Paramus heist, the family's most recent armed robbery. Chesimard would have plenty of expense money while she was on the run. There was a multi-state manhunt on, so everybody kept moving. Marilyn drove her car west, with Assata in the trunk, to a safe house in Pittsburgh. The FBI later found loads of prints at 350 Omega Street, apartment 2. It looked as though just about every revolutionary had been there at one time or another, not just Marilyn and Assata, but Susan, Ryson, Odinga, Mutulu, May 19th member Susan Rautenberg, and even Willie Morales. Federal prosecutors called the place a cross-section of terrorists. Bureau agents also discovered Marilyn's after-action assessment of the breakout in her own handwriting. She judged the operation a victory qualitatively, one that would be felt internationally. There had been only one hiccup. Odinga had received a parking ticket in the name of Edward Holmes during one of his surveillance missions at Clinton, and Marilyn worried that it might somehow lead the cops to the family. It didn't. Back in Brooklyn, May 19th continued to pump out pro-Assata material. The women at Madam Bin designed and printed a poster with an image of the fugitive and the words, "Assata, welcome here." Sylvia and others passed out copies on the Lower East Side, in Harlem, and in Bedford-Stuyvesant, neighborhoods where May 19th thought Assata might find a sympathetic population. Assata was constantly on the move. She had to be. The cops were looking for her everywhere. Back in New York, on the morning of April 16, 1981, she was in the back of a van, riding through the St. Albans section of Queens. Two ex-BLA guys, James Dixon York and Anthony Laborde, were up front. At 10:30 a.m., NYPD officers John Scarangella and Richard Rainey, on patrol in a radio car, saw the van near the corner of 202nd Street and 116th Avenue. It matched the description of the vehicle used in a string of recent robberies, so they hit the lights and signaled the driver to pull over. As they rolled up to the back of the van, 9mm gunfire poured out of the rear window and through the patrol car windshield. Rainey was hit 14 times, but he survived. Scarangella wasn't so lucky. He suffered 2 shots to the head, and after 2 weeks on life support, he died. In June 1986, Laborde and York were convicted of second-degree murder. Both spent the rest of their lives in prison. Assata knew she had to get out of the country, and she considered Libya, Angola, Cuba, and China as possible destinations. The Bahamas was chosen as a suitable short-term refuge. None of the details of Cleo's escape from the United States has ever come to light. Certainly none of the participants has ever revealed anything about the operation. But we do know from the trial testimony of a family member that Big Daddy, Dee, and Doc smuggled Cleo out of the United States in the summer of 1980 and ensconced her in a comfortable seaside villa. In 1984, Assata eventually arrived in Havana. "Cozy in Cuba," blared a Newsday headline. She got political asylum and became an honored guest of the Castro brothers. It was an easy way for the Cubans to give the Americans some political heartburn. The regime lined up a place for her in Building 502, number 33, also in the Vedado district, a few miles west of Old Havana. She even got a phone number, 326-170, a luxury in revolutionary Cuba. 35 years later, Assata's still in Cuba, under the government's protection. Her supporters portray her as a martyred revolutionary living in exile. The struggle Assata and her comrades took bullets for is still not over, according to the writer Michael Denzel Smith. Hands off Assata, now and forever. The radical activist and academic Angela Davis declared that Assata should be allowed to come home and live out her life with justice and peace. The hip-hop artist Common wrote an ode to the fugitive, and conservatives seethed after the rapper got an invite to a 2011 White House poetry party. There are others who want to see Assata back in the United States. Forrester family members, the State Troopers Fraternal Association of New Jersey, and the New Jersey State Association of Chiefs of Police have all demanded her return to U.S. soil to face charges. Prominent politicians, including President Donald Trump, have also clamored for her repatriation. And the FBI still wants her. In 2013, on the 40th anniversary of Trooper Forrester's murder, Assata became the first woman to make the Bureau's Most Wanted Terrorists list. Bringing Joanne Chesimard back here to face justice is still a top priority, said a New Jersey detective on the Joint Terrorism Task Force in Newark. President Barack Obama reportedly raised the Assata issue with the Cuban government during his visit to the island in 2014. However, as long as she has political asylum status and stays in the regime's favor, it's unlikely that the Cubans will throw her out. Assata has kept a low profile in recent years and no longer grants interviews. That's an understandable move, given that U.S. federal and state authorities continue to offer a $2 million reward for information leading to her arrest. New York and Connecticut, 1980. After the Assata breakout, the armed revolutionary fundraising continued, led by Doc and his usual crew, and supported by Susan, Marilyn, Judy, and Sylvia. 3 armored car jobs were botched or aborted, but one in Inwood, New York, paid off big. On April 22, 1980, they hit a Purolator truck doing a run from the European American Bank just over the Queens Line in Nassau County. They made off with $529,000, a new family record. By 1981, the family had collected a large stash of money, at least according to the red ledger that Marilyn kept. But Doc and the guys needed more. Running Banna wasn't cheap. There were monthly mortgage payments, salaries, utilities, and other expenses. And there was the cost of cocaine to consider. With the price of cocaine on the rise and the male family members' growing consumption of the white powder, fresh cash infusions were vital. In the winter of 1981, they executed their next job, the robbery of an armored car outside a Reed's department store in a Danbury, Connecticut shopping center. Susan, Judy, Marilyn, Sylvia with Doc, Ryson, Big Daddy, Materi Sonny Sundiata, and Kawazi Maroon Balagoon, formerly Donald Weems, were all part of the job. Balagoon was a real tough guy who'd been a member of the Black Panther Party and the BLA, as well as a Panther 21 defendant. Back in September 1973, he'd broken out of Rahway State Prison in New Jersey, and in May the following year he'd been shot while trying to free a BLA convict, Richard Harris, who was attending a family funeral in Newark in the custody of a prison guard. They had to call off the Danbury heist at the last minute. The Purolator guy made the cash pickup so quickly that he caught the robbers off guard, Ryson testified in 1982. So they went back a second time. Again, no luck. Doc had somehow spooked the armored car personnel, so they left. The crew went back a third time. Doc and a couple of the guys subdued one of the guards, but the other managed to get behind the wheel of the armored truck and drove off with all the department store's cash. As the truck roared away, the guys opened fire with automatic weapons and shotguns. They sprayed the truck up, Ryson said. They used automatic weapons and shotguns on the truck. Back home in New York, the family plotted a similar attack in Co-op City. Deep in the Bronx, Co-op City is the largest cooperative housing complex in the world, a city within a city, complete with high schools, firehouses, and shopping centers. Marilyn, Susan, and Judy cased the place repeatedly, clocking the coming and going of armored trucks. The family scheduled expropriations on 2 different occasions, and each time they called them off when the truck failed to arrive at the appointed time. They tried once more. Doc assembled some of his usual players for the job: Odinga, Ryson, Sundiata, and Balagoon. On June 2, 1981, they hit an armored truck idling outside Co-op City's Chase Manhattan Bank branch. The women did the getaway driving, and they made off with $292,000. But the trigger-happy Ryson opened up with his M16, killing one Brinks courier, William Maroney, and wounding another, Michael Schlachter, the family's first victims. Doc's considerable drug intake, his carousing at after-hours night spots, and his increasingly erratic behavior might have suggested that he was losing his grip. But if the women of May 19th had any doubts about Shakur's leadership, they didn't act on them. They still revered Doc as a righteous warrior, a leader, an engine for the national liberation of his people. And the women didn't seem to back away from Doc's steering of the group into more violent actions. He wanted to target the police, and Sundiata agreed. The police were the enemy of the black community, he said. They wanted to pick up from the Black Liberation Army and target cops in order to show they weren't invulnerable, and to demonstrate to the community and progressive forces more generally that there was a new revolutionary force to be reckoned with. Doc instructed the crackers to check out station houses, monitor foot traffic, and see when police shift changes took place. The women were on board. They visited at least 6 precincts in Manhattan and Brooklyn. The women drew some schematics so that the family could pick the right locations to plant champagne, its code word for bombs. But the family was thinking about more than dropping off some cases of champagne. They were also tracking individual policemen, when they went to work, what kind of cars they drove, where they lived, where they drank. The women watched them at cop-friendly bars and restaurants, such as Farrell's Bar and Grill near Park Slope. They scoped out Evelyn's Kitchen, not far from the 9th Precinct Station House at 321 East 5th Street on the Lower East Side. According to one restaurant reviewer, the bar had a jukebox that played loud, slurry gems from the 60s. It was open late, and there were plenty of boys in blue with bulging holsters around the place. Before long, the family had lists of police officers selected for assassination. May 19th women were now part of a cop-killing conspiracy. 6. Death to the Klan. As a movement, we have developed a program against organized white supremacy. We have struggled to imbue ourselves with the principle of non-collaboration with the state. Undated internal May 19th paper, dedication. May 19th's inner circle might have been only a handful of dedicated militants, but the group's wider network of affiliated organizations brought the numbers up to 100 to 200 people. Most were in New York, but there were May 19th groupings elsewhere, including Chicago, Boston, and Austin. Leafleting, street protests, film screenings, and fundraisers kept members engaged and busy, often to the point of exhaustion. May 19th was a dogma-bound sect that required complete commitment and submission to the cause. Above-ground member Mary Patton described an ever-escalating spiral of activity, urgency, and exhaustion, the driving machine to will into being an army of white revolutionaries. Brooklyn was home to a major May 19th affiliate. The dimly lit Moncada Library was on the second floor of the building at 434 Fifth Avenue in Park Slope. The place was named after Fidel Castro's assault on the Moncada Army Barracks on July 26, 1953, which had served as the Cuban Revolution's opening salvo. May 19th supported Moncada in the hopes it would draw in supporters and potential recruits. Moncada wasn't exactly a library. There wasn't a lot to read besides left-wing tracts that were strewn around the place. Posters produced by Madame Bin provided a little decoration. Moncada periodically screened agitprop documentaries such as Women of Telecommunications Station No. 6, which chronicled a unit of North Vietnamese women tracking and shooting down U.S. bombers. The suggested donation was $3, child care provided, coffee and Danish available. The library's publications hit on time-tested May 19th tropes. National liberation forces in Zimbabwe, Grenada, and Nicaragua have seriously weakened the power and world hegemony of U.S. imperialism. Moncada proclaimed its solidarity with the growing armed clandestine forces of the Puerto Rican independence movement and with Willie Morales, who had escaped the grip of his captors. Moncada routinely denounced killer cops as well as the rock and roll industry, which was working to destroy the minds and drain the energy of youth by promoting disco and drugs. But the biggest issues for Moncada were local. Early in 1981, Mayor Ed Koch held a public question-and-answer session at John Jay High School in Park Slope. Koch was a polarizing figure at the time, and many liberals and leftists loathed the abrasive, combative, pro-Israel Democrat. Koch's appearance presented Moncada with an opportunity. They showed up in force and heckled him mercilessly. Koch quickly left. Then there was gentrification. During the 1970s, middle-class Manhattanites were snapping up run-down, sandstone-clad row houses in neighborhoods that had once been lumped together as South Brooklyn, and brownstone Brooklyn was being born. Traces of an older, scruffier Brooklyn remained: the annual Grecian Festival, free folk dancing with Carl Finger, and the good old American musical stylings of the Wonder Beans at the Good Coffee House. But signs of incipient gentrification were everywhere. The Kings Bay YMCA offered Inside My Mom afternoon of childbirth films. Surging real estate prices were pushing out many longtime residents with lesser means, including many African Americans. Beloved mom-and-pop stores, luncheonettes, and candy stores were disappearing fast. James Fix's The Complete Book of Running, a sacred text within yuppie ranks, topped the Brooklyn bestseller list. Brunch spots sprouted up and buried well-heeled slopers in Eggs Benedict, cantaloupe slices, and whole wheat pancakes. Gentrification equals mass murder, Moncada proclaimed. The library convened a public meeting on January 18, 1980. The Brownstone Movement and the Ku Klux Klan, a forum against urban genocide. Moncada condemned neighborhood watch groups such as the Slope Citizens Anti-Crime Network as vigilante motor patrol in league with the cops and the KKK. Killer cops, the Klan, gentrification, apartheid, white supremacy. Those evils were all linked in a great chain of oppression fostered by a capitalist, imperialist system. However, many Park Slope residents were genuinely panicked by crime. What is still called vice was rampant. Brothels dotted the neighborhood, as they had since the Second World War, when Priapic seamen from the Brooklyn Navy Yard had prowled the slope. Even today, brothels continue to operate in Park Slope. The New York Times reported in November 2018 that 483 4th Avenue was used as a brothel, with the connivance of the 8-unit building's landlord. Every week, a neighborhood paper, The Phoenix, recounted in lurid detail assorted ruptures in the public order. An axe-wielding maniac hacked 2 homeless men to death in nearby Carroll Gardens. The Chingaling motorcycle gang was busted after cops from the 76th Precinct found dope, handguns, and a blackjack in their clubhouse. Neighborhood delinquents had robbed and assaulted a man and tossed him into the United States' filthiest waterway, the toxic, reeking Gowanus Canal. Slope residents must have been bewildered by Moncada's claims that Brownstoners were the ones waging genocide. Moncada's rhetoric, said the Phoenix, alienates most people, including many who describe themselves as leftists. Moncada was becoming a public nuisance. On May 9, 1981, 6 Moncada members, Richard Ruth, Jonathan Keller, Terry Bisson, Lisa Roth, Donna Borup, and Susan Rautenberg, were doing their usual leafleting on 5th Avenue and 15th Street. Bisson would go on to become a Hugo Award-winning science fiction writer and the author of a novel about John Brown, Fire on the Mountain. My novel was inspired by the Republic of New Africa, revolutionary black nationalists dedicated to liberating the Deep South, he told an interviewer in 2009. Terry Bisson, The Left Left Behind, Oakland, California, PM Press, 2009, page 105. They got into an argument with Ralph Boosty, a resident of Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. The cops arrived, and Boosty said the activists assaulted him. The Moncada people claimed he came at them with a table leg. The NYPD sided with Boosty. Donna Borup recalled what happened next, as reported in a Brooklyn newspaper. They, the police, walked over and said, "You're under arrest." Then one woman said, "Wait a minute, what is going on?" Then the police started clubbing us. Ruth et al. Were hauled off to the 72nd Precinct and charged with resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and assaulting an officer. According to Moncada's account of the episode, the cops threatened to burn down the Moncada Library, to punch out our teeth, to rape the women. In his mugshot, Ruth's head is swathed in a turban-sized white bandage.
I thought we read that in the last book where, now they didn't say police, but we read in New Jersey in the last book, you Negro workers, y'all are going to get out of here. We're going to castrate you. We're going to sodomize you. We're going to paint you white and kick you out of town. Dang. So we're going to mess up your library. We're going to burn it down. We're going to punch your teeth out. We're going to rape the women. Like, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on? Jeez, okay. And apparently these are white women that they're talking to. Man. Wow. Katherine Massey Book Club will pick up there next week. If you have commentary, questions, thoughts to share, the number 720-716-7300, the code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. Don't wait till the last moment if you have commentary to share. Especially folks if you think you've learned anything about Assata, or even folks who pondering what does it mean to be white? Is all white people racist? As a result of reading this here book. We'll think on it as we proceed. Let's see. Let me finish up our previous email. Then I'll get in some of my thoughts, and then we'll make sure we didn't miss any callers. We'll be done for the day. Let's see. All right, picking up chapter 5. Number 1, Assata Shakur. She was a major threat, regarded as the soul of the gang metaphor. The mother hen, she kept them shooting. The various metaphors used to describe Assata Shakur are interesting. Victims of racism, white supremacy may be the best descriptor. They use the same slogans. The soul of the gang, and I don't even know what that means. The mother hen, I don't know what that means either. And they had that in a lot of the headlines. The soul of the movement. The soul of the movement. What is that? An official title? Do you get a championship belt that says that, has your picture on it? Soul of the movement. 2. Lack security. Plotted out the extraction over 9 months. It's a shame this type of planning was not used to perform constructive activities instead of bank robbing. Well, they said, hey, these are expropriation, so this is constructive. Counter racism is expensive. And it even, the bank robberies and such, I mean, I'm just remembering Evelyn Williams' inadmissible evidence. I believe all of those bank robbery cases, at least as it relates to Assata, she was acquitted for all of those. And I think, unless my memory is bad, most of the defendants got acquittals, and it wasn't no cheapy, oh, we were doing the COINTELPRO, and we don't have, as they say in court, in the court of law, we don't have clean hands. We used illegal tactics to spy on them, and we didn't acquire this evidence in a legal manner, so yeah, we're going to dismiss the charges. It wasn't even that. They would go to trial, sit through, and get acquittals, or they couldn't get convictions on these people after they sit up and accuse them and put all this in the newspaper, and you robbed every bank and did all this. They could not get convictions on lots of those cases. And these are no-count militant niggers that you said. You can't even convict them? Come on. The Panther 21, Assata Shakur, you couldn't convict them either. That notwithstanding, yes, be about something constructive. 3. Assata Shakur, $2 million award for information leading to her arrest. This is in 2011. A reward for more information regarding Osama bin Laden was $25 million. In 2011, $2 million is $6.1 million. Yeah, it's still a lot of money for dark people. Man. Let's see. 4. And incidentally, that's why I said, I think in a lot of the books, or at least the first 2 that we read about Assata, they don't really go into a lot of details about the escape and all the rest of it. If you've got, terroristic white people on the lookout for you and you're not going to get any peace, I probably wouldn't do a lot of that either, and I wouldn't do any interviews. 4. Male family, and so this is capital F family members, growing consumption of white powder, cocaine. Cocaine seems to have also been involved with the demise of Huey Newton. See, Huey Newton found shot to death in Oakland Street. Black Panther founder killed in high drug area. This is talked about extensively in I messed up the name. This is talked about extensively in John Potash, Drugs as Weapons Against Us. I think he has an entire chapter specifically on Huey P. Newton and talking about how drugs were used, really kind of lined up with where we are in the book, that drugs were used. You had a lot of black people who were trying to do something constructive as best they could for their understanding at that time, and you had this massive influx of really hard, heavy, addictive drugs, heroin, cocaine, to get lots of these black people addicted and to make them totally different people who have totally different priorities and commitments. He talked about this with Paul Robeson, really Jonestown, even though they will say that Jim Jones went and got former drug addicts to get them cleaned up. Well, you can't really take me as a drug addict and say you're going to clean me up and then just give me new drugs. We get the guy on. I mean, come on. But, yeah, this is widespread. He has many, many, many people in that book, whole chapters, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, and talking about there was a long pattern of this to get black people distracted and focused on other things and just get your brain computer not working at its best. Sobriety would be best. You can parlay that over into all the THC concoctions that they're coming up with now, mushrooms and all the rest of it. Chapter 6. May 19th, dedicated and affiliated 100 to 200 people, dogma-bound sect. I could not find a definition of dogma-bound. I think what they say, like dogma, is having a strong set of beliefs, or this is a strong idea, what have you. I guess they're bound meaning you are tied, some may even say dedicated, to a certain strong idea or belief. I don't really know what those strong ideas and beliefs are. They use the rhetoric to make it sound as if their strong idea is the idea of replacing white supremacy with justice, but I don't believe that. So if they are so-called dogma bound, I don't know what dogma they are bound to. If it's just a lot of rhetoric to sound, down with the racism and we're not, okay, I mean, okay. But like, yeah, that's just white people talking goofy, and then you're running around and robbing banks and bombing and, whatever else. 2. May 19th, affiliated Moncada Library, named after Fidel Castro's barracks, July 26, 1953. See the Freedom Archives digital search engine. It contains documents, audio, and video recordings of various revolutionary organizations from the 1960s. How about that? Posters produced by Madam Ben. These were the posters that said like Assata is welcome here and that sort of thing. Madam Ben was a revolutionary leader of the Viet Cong during the war. She was the chief diplomat and the only woman involved in peace negotiations to end the war, the Vietnam War they're talking about. 1927. She was born in 1927 and is apparently still alive. That is crazy. Like 100. Hey, get it, eating correctly, rest correctly, taking good care of yourself. Love it. Maybe she wasn't drinking all that hard liquor and doing all that craziness. Right on. And we didn't get that far, so we'll get to the rest of it next week. I'll get in some of my notes, make sure we didn't miss any folks, and then we will get ready. Compensatory call-in tomorrow. Let's see. Some of my specific notes on this section. Get back to the beginning of chapter 5. America is trying to lynch me. I guess that's one distinction. So when the white people in May 19, when they do America with a K, they use 1 K. Assata Shakur, when she has America with a K, it's 3 Ks, if that matters at all to you. Let's see. All this talk about the lax security again, it just reminded me, we've read a number of books where folks have talked about incompetent, inept enforcement officials, where maybe they follow the rules, maybe they don't, and just having where you're supposed to be in prison and they don't even make an effort to follow all the rules. They said they got people sleeping on the job. Like Evelyn Williams, she said about when they broke Assata out, she said one of the guards didn't even follow protocol. Like they were in some sort of booth or in contained like room or whatever it was, and they were supposed to stay in there. Like the code says, if there's some sort of prison break or emergency, you don't exit the booth. You stay in the booth, call, for backup or sound the alarm, whatever you're supposed to do, but you're not supposed to leave the booth. She left the booth. Person who was working there. So not following procedure at the prisons. We've heard that over and over again. And we did have the Attica prison uprising mentioned in the book this week. That's the same decade as Assata's escape from prison. So, hey, there you go. Lots of evidence that the prison can be any old type of thing. We know it's going to be mistreatment and plenty of it, but hey, rules, whatever about some rules in prison. Let's see. And then they dump her after they get out of prison, they dump her into a car with these 2 white women as a part of their whole getaway ordeal, how they escaped in all of this. Let's see. The section just after Assata escapes, and it says Assata knew she had to get out of the country. This is when apparently she was in the back of a van and officers approached and they started shooting. This is after that portion. The Bahamas, and she considered Assata, Libya, Angola, Cuba, and China as possible destinations. The Bahamas was chosen as a suitable short-term refuge. None of the details of Cleo's escape from the United States has ever come to light. The Cleo, C-L-E-O, Cleo. Now, Joanne Chesimard, how did she become Cleo? Did I miss that? I didn't understand that. Like, was that her nom de guerre? Her war name was Cleo? I thought it was Assata or Joanne. Like, I didn't understand. Is he talking about somebody else here? Like, what is going on? Cleo's escape from the United States has never come to light. Certainly none of the participants has ever revealed anything about the operation. But what we do know from the trial testimony of a family member that Big Daddy, D, and Doc smuggled Cleo out of the United States in the summer of 1980 and ensconced her in a comfortable seaside villa. And then it goes back to Assata. So I don't know, is that like one of her other aliases? Is it a typo? Like, and even like, how did we go from Assata to Cleo? Even Joanne Chesimard. Where did we get Cleo from? I don't even remember that from Evelyn Williams' book. That's what I'm saying. Is that like a nickname or something? We get any help on that one? That would be great. He's talking about the different people who supported Assata even some years on. He says radical activist and academic Angela Davis declared that Assata should be allowed to come home. One, I normally it's Dr. Assata or Angela Davis, I thought. She has a PhD. I normally give everybody, white, non-white people, that proper title if they've earned it. Two, why is she a radical? What do you mean radical? She's an author. She's published many books. She, I think, has taught at public universities, colleges. Why is she a radical? What is he? That's the one I say right there. Don't be slipping and doing no name calling on the sly man radical. And then it says the hip hop artist Common wrote an ode to the fugitive Assata, which we heard last book club on Evelyn Williams, and conservatives seethed after the rapper got an invite to a 2011 White House poetry party with that no-count scoundrel Obeezy. So you got the Chicago connection there, Obeezy and Common. But when you say conservatives seethed, you mean people classified as white? They got upset. You gonna let that nigger boy come out here? That's that nigger boy made that song about that cop killing Cleo or Assata or whatever name is. You gonna let him come in here and do another no-count poem about his militant, radical, cop-killing Negro friends? You let Kanye come in here and cut a fool too. Bring all his Chicago cousins up here. Lupe, all of them. Let's see. The cost of cocaine, I talked about that before. I said sobriety would be best. I did have a question as to how did he confirm the use of cocaine amongst the male, specifically, family members, because there's no footnote there. How was this cited? Where did you get the evidence of this? I would just like to know. Sobriety would be best. That, and for reals, I'm not going out and have to recruit white women to rob banks to get money to try to break Assata Shakur out of prison and all these other dangerous, harebrained schemes. And we do all this so I can snort cocaine and kick it with non-racist white women? What? No, that doesn't even make sense. Like, come on. This has not been thought out correctly at all. Like, I'm all for having Assata Shakur out of prison, but is that the celebration? Like, we kick it with these white women and snort coke? Like, what? I can't even give BGQ on that one. Just what? If that is accurate, if there's the coke snorting going on. Let's see. Chapter 6. When they start this chapter, this is Death to the Klan. As a movement, we have developed a program against organized white supremacy. See, that's why I said, like, ostensibly, it sounds like this group, if they're dogma bound, they are bound to the idea or notion that they are against racism somehow, some way. That's ostensibly what they're supposed to be about, allegedly. Like I said, I do not believe them, but that's, I mean, hey, I don't even hear people now saying, we are against organized white supremacy or system of white supremacy. I don't really hear people say that now, for the most part. They'll DEI you out of the room. Let's see. But like I said, if that's the dogma that they're supposed to be dedicated to, and that's manifested in robbing banks and snorting coke with black dudes, bombing places, I guess we add that on there too. Like, come on. I think, have we read about so-called gentrification in 2 different books? And they're talking about moving in and kicking out the black people, and they get their whole wheat pancakes and all the rest of it, eggs Benedict and cantaloupe slices and all the goodies. We did, and Evelyn Williams, because she was joining the Harlem Renters group, trying to help them from getting evicted and stop Ed Koch from turning the heat off. They didn't mention that this week when they brought up Ed Koch. That racial dislocation, this is what white people want. Now, we've been reading about this, talking about this for decades and decades. Non-white people not having correct housing and all the rest of it. Non-white people can't even get a pillow. Heat. White people move in and then get whole wheat pancakes. You can't, not even just regular pancakes. You don't get no Eggos. Oh, no. Whole wheat gluten-free pancake. Come on, man. Come on. What do it mean? And even I forgot. Let me pause right there. They said White Park Slope. That's where they were talking about all this at, where they went out and fussed at old Ed Koch and made him run off because they heckled him mercilessly. I said, is White Park Slope, is that a racially restricted region, sundown town? This is what the AI say. AI say, Brother Gus, White Park Slope isn't typically listed amongst famous Midwestern or Western sundown towns with explicit leave by dark signs. However, its history, like many affluent, historically white neighborhoods, involved systemic racial exclusion, but it functioned more through restrictive covenants, redlining, social exclusion, rather than overt sundown town signage. However, no research directly labels Slope Park a sundown town. Its exclusion was woven into broader housing discrimination patterns that kept black people marginalized through practices that have shifted due to civil rights laws. I don't know if it's shifted that much. They even, at the end though, they said, now you still don't really see that many black people in White Slope, or White Park Slope, New York. What a name. Let's see, I think that's at least the 3rd racially restricted region of the day, right? Hohokus, or however you say it, in Scarsdale. At least our 3rd one, right? Let's see. And then they're going to do the punching out and raping and all the rest of it. Let's see, they said Moncada proclaimed its solidarity with the growing armed clandestine forces of Puerto Rico, whatever that means. Moncada routinely denounced killer cops as well as the rock and roll industry, which was working to destroy the minds and drain the energy of the youth by promoting disco and drugs. Now that latter, oh yeah, we are for sure, I would say then and now, white people skillfully use entertainment to advertise and promote drug use. John Potage talked about that. He said, hey, man, you got that scene in Pulp Fiction. You got John Travolta. He all cool, got that long hair, good-looking white man. Matter of fact, that's John Travolta 2 times because he was in the 70s, too. But they got John Travolta out there in Pulp Fiction, and they got him being all cool, and he's snorting cocaine up there with Sam Jackson. They look all cool. Like, yeah, man, he's doing lines, and it's so good. You know, no niggas ain't got no fresh cocaine. Like he said, they got lots of ways of promoting drugs, cocaine, all that. I mean, heavy drugs. And ain't nothing wrong with no cocaine. No problem doing a little cocaine. Just get you a few lines, boy. Get you a few lines. Get you a little marijuana. Ain't nothing wrong with a little wacky tobacco. They just promote all these narcotics and what have you. And then, dang, what happened to Huey P? Dang indeed. Let's see. They say they got the killer cops, the Klan, gentrification, apartheid, white supremacy. Those evils were all linked in a great chain of oppression fostered by capitalist, imperialist system. Are you serious? Are you sick? Like, get out of here. And so what we gonna do, we gonna put a bomb at the police headquarters. Okay. Incidentally, when they said they got all this stuff going around and the folks in the area, they were just, concerned about the local crime. Like, what we going to do about these axe-wielding maniacs? What we going to do about the Chingaling motorcycle gang? Who is the Chingaling motorcycle? What I was thinking, are these white people or non-white people in the Chingaling motorcycle gang that's doing all this terrorizing? Like, does the Chingaling motorcycle gang, do they still exist? Let's see. Oh, but they said they got their hideout. They got busted. They said they got the dope, the handguns, the blackjack in the club. I'm like, good God, you got the blackjack. Wow. They some serious tough dudes in the Chingaling gang. Let's see. Make sure I didn't miss anything before we get ready to wrap up. Again, hopefully, folks can learn a little bit about Assata Shakur. Even, like I said, hey, is this what white people who are not racist, is this how they would function, do we think? I don't know. Even the folks saying, hey, all this stuff that they're doing, as wacky as it, robbing the banks and bombing places, sometimes killing people sometimes, is this helping us get rid of racism? Is this helping us solve many of black people's problems? Just something to think about as we move on through the book. Let's see. Did I miss anything? Might be good. Make sure I didn't miss any. Folks have commentary. Right on it, folks. Following along, if they have thoughts as we matriculate through the book, which is not that long, let me know. It should be, since we have so many folks who think not all white people are racist, should be some folks. What is your assessment of the white people that we've heard about? Did you all know about these people? Would a white person get, credit for that? They help get, I'm trying to think of somebody from like today, Mumia Abu-Jamal, he's in prison. So if a group of white people, men, transgender, whatever, they went and broke Mumia Abu-Jamal out of greater confinement. Hey, that's about what I would think white people who are not racist, that's what they should be doing. Is that how we would process it? Or is it, I guess that's, you got the bulk, you got the muscle to do it. Great. I'd like to see Mumia out of greater confinement, but that don't make you no homie of mine just because you did that, whitey. Process, think about it as we're matriculating through the text. We will be here Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Compensatory call-in. We'll catch up on what has transpired over the last 7 days. Might have a snippet briefly about the pipe bombs in D.C. We got a black Brian J. Cole, black dude. That's the suspect. Say, you the one? You built the parts, you went and paid for the parts and assembled it and, did your recon to study this area and came and put these old bombs out here at the Republican and Democratic headquarters. It was Mr. Cole, right there in Virginia, living with his mom, they say. We will pay attention to that one and more. The Somalians, interesting week as we get ready to wrap up 2026 for sure, since they said you got all these non-white people and you got your whole den of white crackers, the white edge, your advantage. They're going to go out and do all your financing and looting for you and get you a nice fat bankroll. And what you do? Sit around and snort coke all day long. Ought to be shamed. That's why, or another reason why, sobriety would be best. If you luck up and you get some white people and they go out and loot all the crypto, put it in your bank account, you can't go and I'm just going to snort all this up on fentanyl. Come on. Let's be constructive. Let's maintain our brain computer so that we can think and come up with the concepts needed to put whitey crackers, as they say, out of business. That said, Creator, remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. What about Sarah Baldini, M19? Stop saying not all white people are racist. Remind us, stop name-calling people classified as black. Now, we get to cracker and all that later because Fuller say no name-calling, period. But we're going to take baby steps. Stop name-calling people classified as black. Creator, remind us, stop wasting non-white people's time and energy by telling me not all white peoples is racist. Remind us to maximize our time and energy to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.